Marvel, fishing in the skies. Starting with the Ghost Swordsman legacy, this video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151. You really need to think it over carefully. Planet Devourer, do you still have any shame? For matters between gods, find a human to help. The goddess of death glared at the Planet Devourer, almost biting her back teeth and saying, "This face. Speaking of which, you should be the first to lose your face. I don't know who it is, but you are so shameless to ask others to join your kingdom of death. Where is your dignity as a god?" As a result, you were beaten and showed your most annoying side. TSK. The words of the Planet Devourer were full of ridicule. Kinluo almost couldn't help but punch him twice because of his mean look. Chapter 236. God's War. Annihilation appears. The goddess of death was so angry that her bones crackled all over. There were bursts of black light flashing in her eye sockets. The words of the Planet Devourer were not only exposing the shortcomings, it was also a slap in the face. If the fact that to deal with Kinluo, a human, you have to summon the kingdom of death, if it is spread out, the result is no less than the scandal that the Planet Devourer could not do anything about Mephisto. Even more embarrassing than Devourer, after all, Mephisto has the help of Hell. It can be said that he has the advantage of the terrain. Kinluo is in the territory of the goddess of death. The gap is immediately revealed. Devourer, are you going to start a war of gods with me? The goddess of death stared at Devourer, and the power of death on her body seemed to be gushing out like money. When Devourer and Ancient One heard the words War of Gods, their faces changed. The former was incredible, and the latter was a little terrified. To be honest, Kinluo had hardly seen this look on Ancient One, but now he could really see it. He couldn't help but be curious about the so-called War of Gods. This is definitely not as simple as a fight between two gods, otherwise Ancient One would not be so scared. Goddess of Death, you are going to play it to the extreme. Devourer narrowed his eyes, and at this moment his expression became extremely serious. But the goddess of death did not speak. She just looked at Devourer coldly. But it was this look that made the anger in the heart of the Devourer of Worlds rise. He gritted his teeth and looked at the goddess of death, almost speaking word by word. "You want to fight? I will fight. If you want to start a war of gods, I am waiting for you anytime." Even now, hearing the answer of the Devourer of Worlds, the body of the goddess of death was trembling, and a trace of disbelief flashed in her eyes. It seemed that she did not expect that the Devourer of Worlds would agree to such a war of gods so easily. Crack! Suddenly, a sound of space shattering sounded. Then the space not far away began to shatter inch by inch. Attention, not shattering, but shattering. That piece of space completely turned into a hole, and a breath that was almost suffocating came out of the hole. Then a figure that made Ancient One and Kinluo a little unbelievable walked out. Dormammu. No, you are not Dormammu. Ancient One looked at Dormammu, who had become completely demented. His face suddenly changed wildly, and his voice became a little trembling. "You are Annihilation." Annihilation? Annihilation? Kinluo looked at Dormammu in puppet state, and frowned. He was very familiar with the name of Annihilation. He was one of the 5 gods, along with Devourer of Planets and Lady Death, and he was the youngest god. Compared with other gods, he was born many years later, but his power was extremely terrifying. To some extent, his power had already surpassed the existence of gods. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was almost the strongest god. With just one clone, Kinluo did not feel how terrifying the power of Annihilation was. He still had the power of Dormammu that belonged to the dark dimension, but Kinluo's heart was filled with warnings. Although the opponent's power was not strong, it gave him a feeling of extreme danger. At this time, Annihilation controlled Dormammu's body and came to the side of the goddess of death stiffly. With every step, the surrounding space would be shattered. When he approached the back of the goddess of death, not only was the goddess of death trembling, but even the kingdom of death behind her was trembling slightly. Devourer of Planets looked at the Annihilation in front of him. He couldn't help but have a lot of thoughts in his mind. If it was just death, they could have easily controlled him with their current strength, but with annihilation, it would be very different. Apart from anything else, everyone present would beat annihilation together. I'm afraid they wouldn't be the winner in the end. Long time no see, Annihilation. Galactus looked at Annihilation in front of him and greeted him stiffly. Then he madly winked at the goddess of death and said, "Death, let's forget about this for now. If there is anything, we can talk about it later." "How about it?" Galactus also understood Death's fear of Annihilation, so he decisively chose to reconcile and talk about the future later. At least he didn't want to have any relationship with Annihilation, the crazy god. Even being in the same space would make him feel very uncomfortable. After all, who would like to have contact with a god who likes to think about killing gods all day long? However, the goddess of death seemed to have not heard what Galactus said. She focused her eyes on Annihilation, looking obedient. The goddess of death now didn't have any momentum belonging to a god. Dormammu's head turned stiffly for a few times, like a puppet. His eyes stayed on Kinlawo for a few seconds, then he turned to the goddess of death. "War." An extremely hoarse and stiff voice sounded. That voice made people feel numb. It was as if he had not spoken for decades and lost the ability to speak. Perhaps for Annihilation, it might be tens of thousands of years that he had not spoken. The body of the goddess of death trembled again. She raised her head, looked at Dormammu's stiff face, and asked tentatively, "Annihilation, are you saying that I should start the war of gods with Devouring Star?" The Devourer of Planets couldn't help but stare at Annihilation at this time. He was extremely nervous. He really regretted getting involved in this matter now. He would rather his daughter be sad for a while than to provoke Annihilation. "I don't know what's wrong with Annihilation. Why does he have to get involved in these things when he doesn't want to annihilate the creatures?" "Well, no." Annihilation's voice sounded again, this time without the previous hoarseness, but still a little stiff. Hearing this, both Galactus and the goddess of death breathed a sigh of relief, but Annihilus' next words made them feel relieved and fell to the bottom. "I will also participate in the War of Gods." Chapter 152. The priest Jig slowly stood up and left the throne, holding a huge sword, and slowly walked towards Brashu. "Kinlawo, I won't die. I won't die. You wait. I'm not done with you." "Not done." Watching the priest Jig getting closer and closer, Brashu almost went crazy, and the roar shook the entire Ghost Mark space. "For the first time, and the last time, for Brashu's sake, I will help you once. If you use this method to get my power again, you will no longer be qualified to be the Dark Monarch." As the priest Jig said this, the huge sword fell lightly. Just one blow cut off Brashu's big head. At this time, Brashu did not die, and his big head was full of unwillingness. Before he could speak, his body and head turned into pure ghost power and merged into Jig's body. At this moment, the mark of the 9th ghost god on Kinlawo's arm lit up. The mark of the 7th ghost god became dim. There was only a little bit of light surrounding it. When the 7th ghost mark lit up again, Kinlawo could summon Brashu again. But now Brashu is no longer important. Kinlawo looked at the few people who exuded a terrifying aura. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Such power is more than a little stronger than Brashu. More importantly, this is just an incarnation of the priest Jig. When Kinlawo opens the gate of the underworld and releases Jig's true body, what kind of scene will it be? Chapter 335. Stubborn Attributes. No martial ethics. Brother Jig, why don't you vent the hatred in your heart? It's too easy to kill him so easily, isn't it? Kinlawo looked at the priest Jig and said. Kinlawo has a different feeling for this ghost god from other ghost gods, so he changed the name a little. After all, calling him by his name directly is a bit too strange. Hearing Kinlawo's name, Jig's face showed a bit of weirdness, although it was blocked by the blue flame and it was a bit unclear. But Kinlawo was sure that Jiger's expression was quite wonderful at this time. However, Jiger didn't care about these, and said directly, "We will naturally solve the hatred between us, and you don't need to intervene." "Okay, you can leave now. I will wait for your call at any time, but don't let me wait too long." "Again, just this once. If you sacrifice other ghosts and gods to get my power next time, I will withdraw my recognition of you." Kinlawo couldn't help but curl his lips when he heard this. Jiger is a typical guy who gets the advantage and still sells it. It was so refreshing to kill Bu Lakesiu just now, and it was so refreshing to absorb it. Why didn't you say that he didn't need to intervene? But these Kinlawo just thought about it in his heart. He wouldn't say it out loud. If Jiger gave up, it would be fucked. Kinlawo really didn't want to use the power of the law of heaven and earth now. In fact, he didn't know why specifically, but he always felt that this power of the law of heaven and earth, if he used it now, it would have a significant impact on him. On the contrary, the longer he hid it, the more benefits he could get. Now Kinlawo has the mysterious power of the mind, so he absolutely believes and obeys his premonition unconditionally. Don't worry, Brother Jig, wait for this incident to be over, and the next time we meet will not be too far away. Kinlawo retracted his mind after saying that. Jig in the ghost mark felt Kinlawo's departure. A meaningful smile appeared on his face. Then he picked up his giant sword and returned to the throne. However, the blue flames all over his body did not go out, but burned more fiercely. Oh my god, what's going on with you? Are you backfired by your own magic formula? Kinlawo came back to his senses and just saw that Guyi fell to the ground and vomited blood, his hands still slowly pinching the finger formula. Guyi heard this and felt really depressed. What did you do just now? Why is the breath on your body so terrifying? I seem to feel a powerful evil god again. Guyi did not answer Kinlawo's question, but looked at him and said with some concern, the previous rebellion of Brashu left too deep an impression on Guyi. She was really afraid that Kinlawo would create some uncontrollable ghosts and gods for the current situation. It would be a big trouble then. Don't worry, I know what's going on this time. You were injured by the breath of ghosts and gods. Don't resist, I'll help you solve it, Kinlawo said as the ghosts and gods grabbed Guyi's bald head and claws. Not to mention, it feels good. There is no friction from the stubble. It's very smooth. The moment Kinlawo's palm touched Guyi, suddenly, a wisp of blue-black breath came from Guyi's head into Kinlawo's palm. Feeling the breath of ghosts and gods that kept leaving her body, Guyi couldn't help but widen his eyes. His heart was full of disbelief and fear. She didn't expect that just the impact of the breath would leave so much power on her. More importantly, she didn't notice the existence of these powers at all. If it weren't for Kinlawo, these powers might have taken her life at any time. After absorbing Jiger's power, Kinlawo filled Guyi with another wave of blood and chi diversion. Her vitality at this time has become so great. I really don't understand what kind of plane she is doing, and it will consume her vitality so much. Master Ancient One, just leave it to me later. I already have the means to deal with death. Why do you have to consume yourself like this? Kinlawo retracted his palm and looked at Ancient One and said seriously. However, facing Kinlawo's question, Ancient One shook his head and didn't say much, but the hand gestures of the CEO were still changing slowly. Kinlawo was really helpless now, facing the awakening stubborn form of Ancient One. Kinlawo can only choose to compromise, otherwise, if he forcibly stops her, there may be some accidents. Kinlawo looked at the goddess of death and the planet devourer. The two of them did not take action, and their breaths were still confronting each other, like two fighting roosters. Death, you must go against me today, right? The planet devourer looked at the goddess of death. His expression became a little strange, and he couldn't tell where it was strange. Anyway, in Kinlawo's eyes, this expression was very and extremely wretched. So what? What can you do to me, Devourer? The goddess of death looked at Devourer, her face full of "I've got you." The goddess of death clearly sensed it from the aura collision just now. Devourer's condition at this time was not very good. At most it was only 40% full. It was not difficult for the goddess of death to control him. Devourer was furious. Good, good, good. Death, you are really good. Devourer laughed in anger and clapped his hands and cheered, but soon his face showed that strange expression again. Since you look down on me so much, you don't mind me joining forces with others to deal with you. After saying that, Devourer raised his hand. The space around Kinlawo and Ancient One changed, and they appeared behind him in an instant. Seeing this scene, the goddess of death was stunned for a moment, and then her face became ugly. She could control Devourer with less than 40% of his strength. Now, she thought she could also control Kinluo. https://www.tvts.net/ but the combination of the two is not something she can easily control. The only difference between Kinluo and the gods is that he does not have the infinite power of the gods. The fighting power that Kinluo bursts out is definitely not inferior to the power of these gods. There is also a nasty human mage. If she is asked to deal with the devourer of planets, Kinluo and the Ancient One at the same time. Chapter 153. In this situation, any accident could happen. Any accident could also cost them their lives. But when they saw the person who appeared, they were relieved. The person who came was none other than Ancient One, who Kinluo had ordered. https://w.v'_s.net/supreme sorcerer. Now, Odin saw that Ancient One was about to say something, but was interrupted by the power emanating from Ancient One. The surrounding world changed. The familiar mirror space appeared in this special small space. Johnny was stunned. This small space was opened up by him. It can be said that it is one of the special powers of the spirit of vengeance in hell. Johnny only realized the power after awakening, but he never expected that in just a moment, this small space was out of his control. It was completely controlled by Ancient One. At the moment of completing the mirror space, the blue light around Ancient One became more dazzling. The terrifying power of space actually completely separated this space from hell, formed a truly independent space. In this way, even if hell is destroyed, this space will not be affected. Odin, leave immediately if the situation is not right. After leaving this sentence, Guyi disappeared again in front of everyone. It was really a hurry to come and go. Maypark and others only felt their bodies lighten, and the influence of the gods on them had completely disappeared. However, their moods did not relax at all. Instead, they became heavier, and there was an endless feeling of powerlessness. The Silver Surfer frowned slightly. It was not difficult to leave this small space with his power, but after seeing Gian not next to him, the Silver Surfer decisively gave up the idea in his heart. Now it's good, at least everyone's danger has been reduced to the minimum. The most relaxed person here is Odin. His hanging heart was finally put down. At this time, Guyi returned to Kinluo's side, but before he got close, he was shocked by the terrifying aura released by Kinluo's ghost hand and retreated again and again. At the same time, a trace of scarlet blood slid from the corner of her mouth. Chapter 334. Ghosts and Gods Meet. Sacrifice. Brashu. Kinluo just heard himself. So what? The purpose is to open the ghost and god mark, so that the two ghosts and gods can be in the same space. Kinluo had this idea before. It's just that it has never been realized. Those ghosts and gods, whether they are stronger or weaker, are not good guys. As the saying goes, there is no room for two tigers in one mountain. Once two ghosts and gods meet, there will be a bloody battle. The best result at that time is that the weak ghost god will be temporarily swallowed by the strong ghost god. The strong ghost god will gain powerful power in a short time. The weaker one will disappear temporarily. After all, the ghost god's body is still in the underworld, and the Dark Lord has an absolute connection with the underworld. It will not be difficult to summon it back at that time. Just don't think about using the power of that ghost god before summoning it back. Kinluo actually didn't expect that one day he would take the initiative to connect two ghosts and gods together. Kinluo raised these ghosts and gods so well, and he didn't want to temporarily sacrifice one for a little improvement. After all, the improvement is only temporary, but the current situation, coupled with Brashu's previous idea of backlash, made Kinluo think about it. Temporarily abolish Brashu, and abolish him like a murderer. Such a punishment can make Kinluo feel happy, and it will also make Brashu feel terrified. Be honest in the future, otherwise, some ordinary means will have no effect on Brashu. When there is a problem, this guy will play backlash and bring other ghosts and gods to play together. Kinluo's future life will be lively. Not only that, Kinluo also plans to take advantage of this opportunity to temporarily activate the power of the priest Jig, obtain the powerful power of the second awakening in advance. In the space inside the ghost hand, Kinluo is now completely in the perspective of God, and below are two beings exuding a terrifying aura. It is the seventh ghost god, the evil god Brashu, and the ninth ghost god, the priest Jig. Brashu's big eyes are full of fear and disbelief. He has imagined meeting the priest Jig countless times, but he never thought that he would meet under such circumstances. His heart was filled with fear for a while. If we talk about who the evil god Brashu fears the most, it is definitely the priest Jig. After all, the original priest Jig was directly turned into a ghost by him. Although the power of ghosts is strong, for a person who was alive before, this change is definitely enough to make him collapse. Apart from anything else, the endless years alone can drive a person crazy. Guyi is a living example. Before meeting Kinluo, this guy was always completing his own affairs. There is an absolute hatred between Brashu and the priest Jig, but due to various reasons, Jig has never been able to retaliate against Brashu, and Brashu is hiding from Jig, for fear of being found by him. The most fundamental reason why Brashu is so afraid of Jig is that Jig is more powerful than him. Kinluo, let me out quickly. Brashu's roar resounded throughout the space, and there was more fear in the voice. He struggled desperately, but when Kinluo sent him into this space, but he did not remove the seal on him. Now Brashu is a tied fish, ready to be sent into Jig's mouth at any time. Human, what do you mean? At this time, the voice of the priest Jig suddenly sounded. He did not pay attention to Brashu on the ground, and did not even look at him. Instead, he slowly raised his head, as if he could see Kinluo, looking at the empty sky. Kinluo also felt the feeling of looking into the eyes of the priest Jig at this time, looking at the eyes with blue flames. He couldn't help but feel a little trembling in his heart. He is worthy of being the originator of Devil May Cry. Just this one look made him feel so. Even the goddess of death did not bring such pressure to Kinluo. Priest Jig, although I have not mastered your power for the time being, you should know my current situation with your ability. I need your help for this enemy, and Brashu is the reward for my asking you for help, just to avenge his revenge for wanting to bite me back before. Kinluo said sincerely, without any concealment, and also said what he thought. Kinluo, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Let me go. Let me go. I promise to be loyal to you. Hearing Kinluo say that he would be the reward for the priest Jig's action, Brashu's heart began to tremble. It was really hard for him to imagine what it would be like if he fell into the hands of the priest Jig. Relatively speaking, what's the point of being submissive and admitting a mistake? But Kinluo and the priest Jig ignored Brashu, who kept shouting. The priest Jig tapped the giant sword in his hand lightly, and the fire in his eyes flickered, as if he was considering the feasibility of this matter. Because of the unknown time in the ghost mark, Kinluo didn't know how long he had been waiting. Chapter 154. There was a roar in the sky, then a voice that made Kinluo quite unhappy sounded. Death, you shouldn't fight so hard with some ants, right? As the voice sounded, except for Ancient One who was concentrating on making seals, Kinluo and Lady Death looked up at the sky. A huge space passage appeared. Then the huge body of Devourer of Planets, which was 10,000 meters long, walked in. It was emitting colorful light all over its body. These lights were almost in opposition to the kingdom of death, forming a sense of separation between two worlds. Devourer of Planets, what do you mean by coming? That human wizard keeps saying that he is not your servant. Are you rushing to offend me for her? The goddess of death looked at Devourer of Planets with an extremely ugly face. Even the skeleton could see it, and her voice was full of a strong taste of choking fire. Of course I'm not here for that wizard. Goddess of death, let's forget about this for now. That human boy is my daughter's friend. My daughter has begged me, and I can't do anything. Give me a favor. How about that? You can ask for anything. I will definitely help you if I can, Galactus said with a gentle smile on his face, like an older brother. Kinluo couldn't help twitching his eyes when he saw Galactus, who suddenly appeared. Of course, the reason why he had such a reaction, it's not because Galactus came forward to help him. The main reason is, behind Galactus, he saw Silver Surfer, May Parker and others. Damn, how did they come? Galactus brought them here. Isn't this playing with me? Kinluo muttered, and his originally calm mood became a little panicked. He still has two trump cards that he hasn't played yet. Even if the goddess of death is crazy and rampant, he is not afraid. But now Galactus has brought all his weaknesses. How can he fight? Apart from anything else, what if the remaining power of the battle kills them? For a moment, Kinlawo's dissatisfaction with the Devourer of Planets reached its peak, and he cursed the Devourer of Planets for 18 generations. I just don't know if he has that kind of thing. He exhaled a long breath of turbid air. Kinlawo forced himself to calm down, looked at the Ancient One beside him and said, Master Ancient One, if it opens up later, I don't ask you to help me. I just ask you to protect Maypark and the others. The damn Devourer of Planets brought them all here. Hearing Kinlawo's voice transmission, the Ancient One's hand gesture paused for half a second, but soon recovered. She nodded inadvertently. At the same time, the blue light around her body flashed, and she slowly disappeared from the spot. Chapter 333 Operation of Ghost Hand, Safe Space. After the Ancient One Master disappeared, Kinlawo's heart finally relaxed a little. Apart from anything else, just relying on the Ancient One Master's control over the power of space, plus the help of the space gem, the ability to escape is absolutely nothing to say. It is not easy for the gods to catch her. At the critical moment, he could have taken Maypark and others away. Kinlawo made a sword finger with his hand, and the sword light flashed on his sharp nails. The sword light was on the ghost hand, on the mark that belonged to Brashu. So far, this is the first time that the ghost hand has been injured, and it was scratched by Kinlawo himself. That taste is definitely thousands of times more painful than normal pain. Kinlawo's body trembled involuntarily. As the mark was scratched, no blood flowed out, only a dark purple breath could be seen faintly flowing on the mark. At the same time, Kinlawo looked at the 9th mark that had not yet lit up. Brashu, who was being suppressed under the giant sword, suddenly felt a tremor all over his body. A bad premonition came to his mind. However, before he could react, the world around him changed strangely. He saw a man holding a giant sword, who was the one he least wanted to see. In hell, face. Do you think you have face in front of me, Devourer? The goddess of death sneered at the words, and her eyes were full of ridicule when she looked at Devourer. Although they are all 5 gods, the goddess of death really looks down on Devourer from the bottom of her heart. She always thinks it is a shame to be on the same level with such a guy. Even after Devourer is full, his fighting power is very terrifying, and she is not his real opponent. But has Devourer ever been full? Not only has he never been full, he is hungry most of the time, not to mention the existence of the same gods. Even the ants under the gods, many of them have taken advantage of Devourer when he is hungry. Even her subordinate Mephisto has taken great advantage of Devourer. It would be strange if the goddess of death could look up to him. Death, are you going too far? Do you think I really can't touch you? Don't forget that you have been knocked down by me too. Devourer looked at the goddess of death and his face became ugly, especially with Ganata watching behind him. Doesn't he, the great Devourer of Planets, have any face? Haha. It was only that time in countless years. What face do you have to say? Have you forgotten the time when you were helpless against the ants under my feet? The goddess of death sneered disdainfully, and the mockery on her face became more and more intense. As the saying goes, don't hit someone in the face, and don't expose someone's shortcomings when scolding him. The goddess of death is more than just exposing his shortcomings. It's like rubbing salt into the wound. Because of this incident, the Devourer of Planets has been shameless for many years. Death, don't go too far. Anyway, I will protect these 2 humans today. If you are not convinced, let's go to war today. It just so happens that I haven't fought with you for a while. My hands are itching so badly. After the voice of the Devourer of Planets fell, a dazzling colorful light burst out from his body. Fight me if you want. Am I afraid of you? The goddess of death was also unwilling to be outdone, and the kingdom of death trembled violently. It was as if countless undead were roaring inside. For a moment, the terrifying atmosphere spread instantly. Maypark and others who were hiding in another space couldn't help but feel suffocated. Ganata's face was full of worry. She didn't expect that the goddess of death would really not hesitate to offend her father and kill Kinlawo and others. What worried her even more was that her father's condition was not so good at this time. with her understanding of the power of the Devourer of Planets. At this time, the Devourer of Planets was only 3/4 full at most. Only a 5/4 full Devourer of Planets could have the power to suppress the Goddess of Death in a short period of time. Now the Devourer of Planets is definitely not the opponent of the Goddess of Death. Maypark and others were also full of anxiety and uneasiness. The collision of the breath of the gods alone was unbearable for them. Once Kinluo had something wrong, they might be ready to start the feast before they even got close. Is this the most powerful existence in the world? Such power should not be so far away. Tony murmured. The power of the gods really made him realize what despair is. However, at this moment, a blue light flashed. Johnny and Old Carter became nervous instantly. Even Ganata and Silver Surfer, who were not far away, became serious. Chapter 155. The terrifying power once again gave the Goddess of Death a critical strike. But this is not over yet. The broken wine god did not disappear as usual. Instead, he turned into fragments of the wine god gourd. Those fragments shot out like a violent storm. All fell on the Goddess of Death. Kinluo swore that he had never used the power of the wine god spell to do anything from beginning to end. But this time, the wine god was very determined to attack the Goddess of Death one after another. In the end, there was a wave of self-destructive shrapnel attacks. Isn't it over after a smash in the past? Kinluo's heart was full of doubts, but he really couldn't find a place to explain this weird thing. With a great enemy at hand, he couldn't think too much. After using death resistance to heal the injuries in his body, Kinluo rushed towards the Goddess of Death again with a sword. But Kinluo didn't notice that the luster of his Fipang god armor was a little dimmer than before. The Goddess of Death looked extremely embarrassed at this time. There was no good place on the bones all over her body. There were broken places in many places. What's even more terrifying is that the whole body is full of metal fragments of the wine god gourd. The sword god on the forehead is still there, even if it is a lot dimmer. But there is still no intention of dissipating. To be honest, seeing the Goddess of Death like this, Kinluo couldn't bear to do it. It's just too miserable. The most important thing is that there is no place to start. Of course, Kinluo was just thinking about it. Facing such an existence that wants to kill him, he will not be merciful. Fierce dragon breaking sky slash. Kinluo turned into a wandering dragon, and the long sword turned into dragon teeth and bit the body of the Goddess of Death fiercely. Crack! With a crisp sound of broken bones, the ribs of the Goddess of Death were cut off by Kinluo. Phantom sword. Kinluo didn't even wait to say the word dance. Suddenly, he felt an extreme danger coming, and decisively opened the ghost step, and his whole body became illusory. Rumble. At the moment when Kinluo hid his figure, the world suddenly trembled violently. Then a clear gray-white country appeared in the sky. At the same time, the Goddess of Death floated up. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The gourd fragments were forced out of the body, and disappeared directly into the space crack with a sound of breaking through the air. The Kingdom of Death? Kinluo was shocked when he saw the gray-white kingdom. He never thought that at this time, the hometown of the Goddess of Death would suddenly appear. Kinluo was shocked. Guyi was dumbfounded. She mobilized the power of space and found that the Kingdom of Death outside the hell had disappeared strangely. She didn't even notice it at all. Then she appeared in hell. Chapter 332. All previous efforts were abandoned, and the swallowing star descended. Damn it, it's in vain. Kinluo bit his back teeth and looked at the fully recovered Goddess of Death. His face became ugly. Under the cover of the Kingdom of Death, the scars on the Goddess of Death began to recover at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even the sword god on her forehead collapsed directly, turned into starlight. Kinluo raised the ancient short sword in his hand and swung it out with a sword-slashing move. The dazzling sword light bombarded the Kingdom of Death at a very fast speed. However, it did not play any special role. The power of the sword-slashing move only made the Kingdom of Death tremble. The sword light dissipated before it fell on the body of the Goddess of Death. Kinluo's face became even gloomier. When the body of the Goddess of Death stood in front of the Kingdom of Death, the scars all over her body had completely disappeared. She regained her white jade appearance. At this time, the space around Kinluo surged, and Guyi stood beside him. I'm sorry, Kinluo. I couldn't stop the Kingdom of Death from coming. Guyi said with an apologetic look on his face. Don't say that, Master Ancient One. It's not your fault. Can't you see that the guy is the kingdom of death? Wherever she is, the kingdom of death will appear. It has nothing to do with whether you block the space. This guy is just playing with us. Now it's serious. Kinluo looked at the kingdom of death and the goddess of death in the sky. With the blessing of the mind's eye, Kinluo saw things that normal people could not perceive. Under the mind's eye, there is no kingdom of death and goddess of death. There are just two groups of death forces, one large and one small. It's just that these two forces of death are now integrated into one. Ancient One did not let go because of Kinluo's words. She clenched her fists and stared at the goddess of death in the sky, with an unwilling look in her eyes. If you can leave in a while, Master Ancient One, you can retreat first, and leave the rest to me, Kinluo said, with a special light flashing on his ghost hand. He was ready to play a big wave. I didn't plan to play like this originally, but now it seems that I have to do it. It can also be regarded as a punishment for Brashu. Kinluo, what do you mean? Will I become a burden to you? Guyi looked at Kinluo with doubts and confusion in his eyes. There was an indescribable aggrieved feeling in his heart. He never thought that she, the supreme magician, would not even be qualified to play auxiliary. Of course not. It's just that I'm not sure if I can control it when I use that power. There's no way. Who made me not reach the realm enough? Kinluo hurriedly explained. He wanted Guyi to be his butler. If he hurt his heart too much, this guy would directly commit suicide, and then all would be lost. Guyi's expression eased a little, but he shook his head firmly. Looking at the goddess of death in the sky, he began to seal with his hands. This time, Guyi's movements of sealing with his hands were very slow. It can be said that one by one, and with each seal, Guyi's face would become ugly. What's going on? It's really a matter of life and death. Kinluo felt the rapidly declining vitality in Guyi's body and his face changed slightly. Those who didn't know would think that the goddess of death had taken action, but Kinluo knew the source of the absorption of life force was the strange mark in Guyi's hand. Blood and chi diverted. Kinluo's body was filled with red light, and the blood and chi turned into pure life force and merged into Guyi's body. Guyi's pale face suddenly regained a blush. Useless struggle. At this time, the voice of the female death in the sky suddenly came. This was the first time that the goddess of death spoke after transforming into a skeleton. However, Guyi didn't care and still insisted on the mark in his hand. However, at this moment, if you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156. This shows how powerful this move is. From the perspective of single power, the move of the Sword God has surpassed Kinluo's awakening power. Kinluo once tried to use the Sword God. It's a pity that his power is always a little bit lacking. After all, he is not a pure fairy sword person. He has not practiced the secret skills of Shushan. He simply uses the sword soul to perform the various swordsmanship of Shushan. This feeling is like the sword sect and the air sect of Huashan. Kinluo is equivalent to using the sword sex method to perform the air sex skills. Although some moves have no effect, the final big move cannot be released. But after getting the Fipeng God armor, it will make up for Kinluo's lack of spiritual power. The divine power in the Fipeng God armor is much stronger than the pure spiritual power. Not only can the strongest sword tactics be performed, but there is even a bonus. Feel the terrifying sword intent gathered by Kinluo. Ah! The goddess of death immediately let out a long and shocking roar. The terrifying power of death spread out, instantly destroying all the evil light power around. Then it turned into a black shadow and flew towards Kinluo at a high speed. The death sickle in his hand gathered an incomparable and terrifying power of death. However, the goddess of death was fast. Kinluo was faster than her under the blessing of the Sword God. Kinluo seemed to be late and early. The ancient short sword in his hand, which had completely turned into a white long sword, instantly pierced the head of the goddess of death. For a moment, the breath of death spread wildly. The goddess of death stood still, on the head with the sword inserted. Bone fragments kept falling. Those were all solid death power. Kinluo saw this scene, and he didn't believe that his sword god directly killed the goddess of death. After all, this move is at best a single damage NB, and it is not exaggerated to the extent that it can kill a god in seconds. Otherwise, the Shushan inheritance would not be rare. At least it would have to be a demigod level. But the goddess of death must have been seriously injured. Take advantage of her weakness to kill her. Kinluo used a Thomas roundhouse kick to kick the goddess of death away. However, he did not pull out the sword god on her head. Instead, he used the power of the sword god to continue to suppress the goddess of death. Kinluo flipped his hand at this time, and the Ascrid version of the wine fairy gourd appeared in his hand. This is still the crooked wine fairy gourd. There is no way. Time is too tight. The materials of the destroyer have not been refined yet. I can only make do with the previous ones. The wine is strong. The drunkenness is surging. Call the gods to drink together and get drunk for thousands of years. As the spell was recited, Kinluo directly poured a gourd of the wine into his stomach. The terrifying power of the Fiping god armor continued to stir in his body, brewing Kinluo's most powerful wine god spell in history. Chapter 331 Timely Assistance. The kingdom is coming. Kinluo's face flushed. The wine god spell at this time is different from before. The divine power is much more difficult to control than the original power in Kinluo's body. In addition, the power of the other four systems is integrated. The violent power rushed through Kinluo's body. If he had not been promoted to Emperor Blood-Killing Heaven, his physical strength would have reached a certain level. If he had been replaced by the previous him, his internal organs might have been torn apart by the violent power in his body. Under the guidance of the Dionysus curse, this violent power gathered on the Dionysus gourd in front of Kinluo. Bang! Just a moment of contact. The Dionysus gourd exploded, and countless fragments burst, spreading in all directions. Damn it! Come back to me! Kinluo shouted in a low voice, and the power of fluctuations spread out from his mental power. All the gourd fragments around were gathered back. However, because the Dionysus curse was too powerful this time, even though Kinluo had tried his best to use the power of fluctuations to converge the gourd fragments that spread out, he missed 7 or 8. The incomplete Dionysus gourd was suspended in the air, and the internal power became extremely unstable. Kinluo couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Although he had expected such a result, he didn't expect the situation to be so bad. The main reason is that the Dionysus gourd is too inferior. If there were more metal, it would not collapse at the first touch. Kinluo was embarrassed. If the Dionysus spell could not be cast, Kinluo would have to be peeled off by the backlash of this spell, not to mention severely injuring the goddess of death. In that case, it would be a lot of fun. Damn Odin, why are you making fake and shoddy products for no reason? This is troublesome. Kinluo stared at the increasingly unstable Dionysus gourd. He was thinking about a solution in his heart. However, at this moment, Kinluo suddenly heard a sound of breaking through the air. Then Kinluo saw several gourd fragments wrapped in the blue space force, flying towards the Dionysus gourd at a high speed. In the blink of an eye, the incomplete Dionysus gourd was completed. Guyi, you guy, I really love you. Kinluo smiled when he saw this, and he was grateful to Guyi's 8 generations of ancestors in his heart. Guyi, who was far away from the edge of hell, heard Kinluo's shout, and his face suddenly showed a bit of unnatural expression, but she quickly hid it. At this time, Guyi quickly formed seals with both hands, and blue ripples spread out. The goddess of death, who was struggling to break free from the suppression of the sword god, suddenly sank, and the space around her began to collapse. This made the goddess of death, who was already in a bad state, even worse. As the wine god gourd was fully replenished, the power of the wine god spell contained in it gradually stabilized. The wine is strong, the drunkenness is surging. Call the gods to drink together and get drunk for thousands of years. Kinluo recited the wine god spell loudly again, and in an instant, the wine god gourd turned directly into a stream of light and rushed towards the goddess of death. In an instant, the wine god gourd turned into the familiar appearance of the wine god, but this time the wine god was slightly different from before. He still held a wine jar and wore a red belly band. But the skin on his body showed a strange black and purple, and the skin was full of black veins, which looked a bit like the demon child in the new zombie. Plus the size of Niza. Kinluo was doubtful. Was it really the god of wine that he summoned, or some demon? No matter how you look at it, it doesn't look like the secret technique of the famous and upright Shushan. It's just that the power manifested by the god of wine spell will not return to Kinluo. The god of wine raised the huge wine jar in his hand, and did not even wait for Kinluo to give orders. He directly launched a fierce attack on the goddess of death. Boom, boom, boom. The wine jar hit the goddess of death continuously. It smashed it deeply into the ground. The violent power made the whole hell tremble. The pore space has been torn apart countless times. Boom. With a loud bang, the god of wine exploded. Chapter 157. Seeing that his daughter was going to die, Galactus was really anxious. Silver Surfer showed a helpless smile on his face, obviously seeing through everything, but he didn't say much. He just watched the farce between the father and daughter silently. In fact, it was not just Silver Surfer. Maypark and the others all saw through it. In fact, there was no way not to see through it. The main reason was that Ganada's movements and expressions were too artificial. There was no difference from the bloody heroine in a certain TV show. It was hard for them not to see through it. As for why Galactus didn't see it, maybe it was because he was too concerned. You can't say that a dignified god doesn't have a good brain, right? Alright, I will take action on this matter. Don't make trouble, otherwise, I will swallow you in the earth right now. Galactus gritted his teeth and finally chose to compromise, but still said something cruel. Thank you, Dad. Then let's go now. Ganada burst into tears and laughed instantly, looking at Galactus happily and said, looking at Ganada's appearance, Devourer of Planets finally came to his senses as if awakened from a dream. https://w.tvts.net/ He was being manipulated, but once words are spoken, they cannot be taken back. Even though he felt a little regretful, there was nothing he could do since things had come to this point. Devourer of Planets waved his hand helplessly and said, wait a little longer, and we will show up when the Kingdom of Death comes. Otherwise, we will have to break through her Kingdom of Death to enter Hell, which is too troublesome. Okay, Father. Ganada nodded obediently, looking like a caring little cotton-padded jacket. When to manipulate her father and when to act obedient, Ganada knew it clearly in her heart. Maypark now fixed his eyes on Odin, who was frowning, and said, Lord God King, can you teleport us to Hell later? That's no problem, but why are you going there? You are not thinking of helping Kinluo, are you? If that's the case, I advise you to give up this idea. This is already a battle at the god level. Even I find it difficult to intervene, let alone you, Odin said with a serious expression. In fact, what Odin was embarrassed to say was that even he could not intervene in such a battle. After all, his body was old and he could not use all the divine power in his body. Didn't you see that Ancient One, who was still in his peak state, could only rely on the Infinity Stones to assist? How could he directly intervene in such a battle? No matter what, we have to go to Hell. We can't just watch Kin face danger or even death alone. That's right. If that idiot dies, I will be very bored. We have to fight side by side with Brother Kin. Right, Venom? Venom, you say so, right? Old Carter and Johnny didn't speak, but they have made up their minds. No, don't you understand what I said? No matter where you go, nothing will change. Instead, you may become a burden to Kinluo, Odin said with an angry and helpless look. It doesn't matter. I can open up an independent space in Hell. We won't be a burden to Brother Kin, Johnny said seriously. Odin, Humphrey. Galactus looked at Maypark and others and snorted coldly. Then he sent a voice to Silver Surfer, if these humans get in the way, you can take Ganada to solve them and save them from making trouble. Yes, Master. Silver Surfer smiled and nodded, and naturally understood what Galactus meant by solve. Chapter 330 Horrible Power, Shushan Sword God Rumble. The power of fluctuations was completely released. https://www.vts.net/ The terrifying power directly suppressed the goddess of death on the ground. It was just the explosive power of the dark sky wave eye. It did not cause any fatal damage to the goddess of death. It only slightly injured her. The cracks in the bones on her body soon recovered under the cover of the power of death. The goddess of death stood up staggeringly. The power of death in her hand gently wiped the sickle of death. In an instant, the originally domineering and ferocious sickle underwent a strange change. I saw a burst of black light twisting. The sickle of death became an extremely ordinary appearance. Just a black long stick with a black sickle head inlaid, but it was just an ordinary change that made Kinlawo tremble with fear, because the power emitted by the sickle of death after the transformation is 10 times stronger than the ferocious appearance before. The power of death contained in it even formed a liquid state, which kept dripping from the sickle of death. Gulp. Kinlawo swallowed hard, staring at the goddess of death. He knew very well that the skeleton was more terrifying than the goddess of death. Kinlawo had to admit that he had underestimated the power of the gods. Without a complete second awakening, he was still a little powerless. Suddenly, the figure of the goddess of death flashed and appeared in front of Kinlawo, and the sickle chopped directly at Kinlawo's neck. The speed was so fast that it was comparable to teleportation. Even Kinlawo was a little bit unresponsive, and the sickle was less than 10 centimeters away from him. He could clearly feel the sharp pain coming from his throat. Fortunately, he turned on the automatic blocking buff in advance. Without his reaction, his body automatically moved. The ancient short sword blocked the edge of the sickle of death in a weird posture. Ding! The two collided, and there was a sound of metal clashing. Kinlawo only felt a strong force coming, and the whole person retreated involuntarily. At the same time, the blood and chi surged. His throat felt slightly sweet, and a bloody smell filled his mouth. Kinlawo was secretly shocked. He never thought that just one blow would almost make him vomit blood. At this time, the goddess of death seemed like a cold killing machine. Without a word, she attacked Kinlawo again silently. Kinlawo decisively broke a seal and slapped the ancient dagger in his hand to the ground. Evil light wave array. As the power of evil light spread, the huge lightning shield forcibly controlled the goddess of death. Even though the sickle of the goddess of death easily cut a gap in the lightning shield, but the powerful control ability of the evil light wave array still caused the speed of the goddess of death to drop sharply. With this time to breathe, Kinlawo immediately adjusted his state, and then the sword energy in his body surged rapidly, converging on the ancient dagger. At the same time, the ancient short sword also changed and became a classic ancient long sword. Sword God. With Kinlawo's roar, the sword energy around him condensed into a white light. Then an old man slowly appeared in the white light. The old man only used his fingers as a sword, and that kind of supreme sword intent made people feel a sense of worship from the bottom of their hearts. Sword God, the strongest sword technique known in Shushan. It needs to be possessed by the sword god of the god realm through the descent of gods to exert its power, enough to destroy the world. Soon the old man's figure dissipated, but the sword intent was condensed in the ancient short sword. At this time, only the power emitted by the ancient short sword has caused the space to begin to shatter. Chapter 158. In just over 10 seconds, the thorn wheel of the wave sword took away the last bit of flesh and blood of the goddess of death. Looking at the bones that looked like mutton fat jade, Kinlawo felt that it was so beautiful. This feeling was very wonderful. Of course not the physical feeling, it was a feeling like looking at a perfect work of art. In contrast, Johnny and Old Carter's transformation seemed a little too chilling. It was completely like the difference between stone and jade. However, at this moment, the skeleton of the goddess of death moved. She raised her hands above her head and the demon prison blood kill, as if she was stretching. The skeleton kept making that kind of crisp sound. The crisp sound even exceeded the roaring sound of the blood of the demon prison blood kill. Kinlawo saw this scene in front of him, and he couldn't help but feel his heart tighten, and his eyes were full of horror. You know, the skill of the demon prison blood kill has a very terrifying suppression power. This suppression power has a very special feature. So far, Kinlawo has not seen anyone who can break this suppression, but the goddess of death did it. Not only did she do it, She even stretched herself in the demon prison blood kill. Boom. Suddenly, the power of the demon prison blood kill became unstable. The violent blood power seemed to be suppressed by some force and began to stagnate. Kinluo knew it with his ass. This was definitely the work of the goddess of death. Kinluo's eyes flashed with the unique lightning luster of the wave power. In an instant, the sky was dark. Countless blue eyes were scattered in the sky. Among them, there were only 1 or 2 red wave eyes. The vast majority of the rest were blue wave eyes containing lightning power. Crack, crack, crack. The unique skill power of the dark sky wave eye caused the surrounding space to begin to shatter. Even Guyi had no way to repair the shattered space. Whenever the space force approached, it would be bounced away by the power of the dark sky wave eye. Fortunately, the range covered by the dark sky wave eye was not too wide. Guyi directly gave up repairing the space within the range of the dark sky wave eye. He began to maintain the stability of the surrounding space. Boom. Countless eyes exploded, and the terrifying wave force bombarded the body of the goddess of death. It directly blasted black cracks on her bones. Those cracks looked very fine, as if they were drawn with a neutral pen. Planet Devourer. Didn't you say that Brother Keen was in danger? Why does it seem that the guy fighting with Brother Keen is in danger now? Venom looked at the scenes on the screen and couldn't help but speak. Although May Parker and Tony and others didn't say anything, but their puzzled eyes were enough to explain everything. https://w.tvts.net/devoured species. I don't know where I left the power to create something like you. Who gave you the courage to talk to me like this? Planet Devourer glanced at Venom coldly. In an instant, Venom felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. A kind of innate oppression and a feeling of impending death surged into Venom's heart. He almost turned into a pool of mud and fell from the little spider. Fortunately, Ganata dodged and blocked the front of Galactus. Otherwise, if Galactus looked at him for a while, he would have died. Dad, you are not allowed to treat my friend like this. Ganata glared at Galactus and said dissatisfiedly. Seeing this, Galactus' mouth twitched and finally suppressed his dissatisfaction. My Lord God, I apologize to you for Venom's rudeness. May I ask, what is Kinluo's current situation? We really can't see where he is in danger. May Parker stood up, lowered his posture, and asked respectfully. For her now, all the mess is not important. She just urgently wants to know how Kinluo is doing. Ignorant human, you only look at the surface? If I'm not mistaken, Kinluo, that kid, even if he didn't use his full strength, he used 70% to 80% of his strength, right? And Death just used his full strength. Galactus's expression eased a little, and he spoke with a little disdain in his tone. Then the Devourer of Planets said with a slightly solemn tone, maintaining the appearance that Death thinks is a perfect human form will restrain a lot of her power, and she in the form of bones is the real goddess of death. Chapter 329 Mutual Control and Helpless Compromise. The words of the Devourer of Planets made everyone's heart sink. They are all people around Kinluo. They have probably seen the power Kinluo has exerted. Needless to say, Maypark, she has seen Kinluo's awakening skills more than once. Although the awakening skills at the beginning were far less powerful than now, but Maypark also knew that in addition to becoming bigger, Kinluo had almost exerted his full strength, and the other party only used half of his strength. Now he has to exert his full strength. It's very clear, Kinluo is not the opponent of the goddess of death in terms of hard power. Father, go and help Kinluo. Ganata was also anxious at this time. Compared with others, Ganata knew the power between gods better. If his father was not full, it would be difficult for him to be the opponent of the goddess of death. This was confirmed countless years ago. The only time that Devourer of Planets had the upper hand was when he was only 60% full. I don't know how many planets were digested because of this battle. Ganata, do you want me to fight against death for the sake of a human being? Devourer of Planets looked at Ganata, with an inexplicable meaning in his eyes, but his face was a look of dignity without anger. It was the first time that Ganata saw her father show such an expression to him. Even when she ran away from home for the first time, Devourer of Planets had never done this. But Ganata soon came to her senses. If her father really didn't want to help her, he wouldn't have come to Earth on purpose. He would not have shown the battle scene between Kinluo and the goddess of death to everyone. Obviously, her father wanted to control her through this matter, but as the first leaky cotton padded jacket, how could Ganata be controlled by her old father? Father, if you don't help me, forget it. I'll go by myself. Anyway, I know how to go to hell. Just pretend that you have never given birth to a daughter like me. Ganata pretended to be heartbroken. Then the purple light flashed around him, and the same armor as Galactus covered his whole body. Galactus' eyes twitched when he saw this. How could he let his daughter go to trouble death? That would be really courting death. Death, that crazy woman, would not let Ganata go for his sake. There were already a lot of bad things between them. Ganata, I can help with this matter, but you have to promise me that you must stay by my side in the future. After all, if you offend death, that guy will not let it go. I must ensure your safety. Galactus reached out and grabbed Ganata, and said seriously, No, father. I won't agree. I will handle this matter myself. Thank you for telling me everything. If anything happens to me, don't forget me. Ganata's eyes flashed with a hint of pride, but it was quickly hidden, and she still had the resolute look of going to die generously. Alas, no, Ganata. You have to understand that I am doing this for your own good. Why don't you listen to me, kid? Chapter 159. What's going on? One second they were still shouting and killing, and the next second they were communicating about father-daughter affection? Is it necessary to change so quickly? Maypark and the others exchanged glances, but in the end there was no unusual movement, just quietly watching everything happening in front of them. Father? Why did you come here? And you also sealed Sister Mai and the others in this space. You shouldn't be like this when you come to see me, right? At this time, Ganata came back to his senses as if waking up from a dream, and said with a bit of dissatisfaction on his face, It's not that I'm a little bored waiting for you, so I'm just playing with them. Don't worry, I didn't do anything to them. Otherwise, do you think they would still stand here and listen to us? The Devourer of Planets smiled and said. There was a relaxed look in his words. However, Maypark and the others were broken when they heard the words, and it seemed as if there were 10,000 grass mud horses roaring through their hearts. Tony's countless complaints were even more suppressed in his chest. If the situation was not unclear now, he would not be able to beat the Devourer of Planets. Tony had to let the Devourer of Planets know what a poisonous tongue Gatling is. Odin's single eye twitched for a while, but he felt much more at ease, as long as the Devourer of Planets didn't intend to attack the Earth. Nothing else mattered. That was because there were so many people around, and Odin had to maintain the demeanor of a god king. Otherwise, he would have sat down on the ground long ago. Ganata heard her father's words and nodded thoughtfully. Just as her father said, if he really wanted to attack Maypark and the others, I'm afraid she wouldn't even be able to see the corpse now. Young master, in fact, we came to Earth this time, in addition to seeing you, there is another important thing to tell you. About Kinluo. At this time, the Silver Surfer bowed slightly to Ganata and said, https://w.v''s.net/Uncle Silver, you seem to be different. What's wrong with Kinluo? What happened? Ganata clearly felt the change in the Silver Surfer, but she was more concerned about Kinluo's affairs. After all, when her father can personally take action, it is definitely not a trivial matter. Hearing Kinluo's name, Maypark and the others also pricked up their ears. They were also very concerned about Kinluo's current situation. It was just that they had no ability and no way to know Kinluo's situation. Stop talking. After the Devourer glared at the Silver Surfer beside him, he said to Ganata, of course something happened. That kid is also very brave. He dared to fight against death. The situation seems good, but it is actually not optimistic. Ganata, including Maypark and others, were all shocked when they heard this. Ganata even exclaimed, and death? How could Kinluo provoke her? Just when everyone wanted to ask, Devourer waved his hand. Suddenly, the 7-color light in front of him twisted, and then turned into a huge screen. The screen was Kinluo and the goddess of death. In hell, Kinluo held one of the 24 swords of the storm in his hand and directly opened the extreme ghost swordsmanship, storm style, Countless sword lights flashed around the goddess of death. The huge death tornado was directly torn apart by the sword light, and the body of the goddess of death was exposed in the sword light. In an instant, countless black air and sword light intertwined. At the same time, there was an infinite white beauty. But now Kinluo no longer had the heart to appreciate it. The sword light was getting faster and faster. At this time, the goddess of death had been completely submerged in the sword light. "Human, have you fought enough?" Suddenly, the voice of the goddess of death came into Kinluo's ears. That voice was endlessly cold and full of the breath of death. It seemed to be emitted by a robot without any emotion. Kinluo was shocked when he heard it. He immediately performed the last blow of the iron-cutting style. As the sword light burst into the sky, a huge hole was torn in the space of the whole sky. It seemed that the whole sky was split in half by this sword. But soon the huge space crack healed automatically, and it was more than 100 times faster than before. However, at this moment, a palm full of black lines suddenly stretched out and grabbed Kinluo's sword. The devastated goddess of death appeared in front of Kinluo. At this time, the goddess of death was like a broken porcelain doll. Her body was covered with black lines, and the extremely strong breath of death emanated from those lines. Suddenly, a black thread-like death force flowed along the arm of the goddess of death and slowly flowed on the blade of the ancient dagger. It seemed that the goddess of death was going to use the power of death to destroy Kinluo's ancient dagger. Chapter 328 Flesh and blood separated, white bones and true body. The black power of death was like a maggot attached to the bone. It was tightly wrapped around the ancient dagger. It began to break the edge of the blade bit by bit. Faced with such a scene, Kinluo's face was not at all flustered, but instead showed a mocking smile. The goddess of death wanted to destroy his weapon, which was really crazy. Don't forget, the ancient dagger was made of the materials of that old bastard Danchuan. It contains the unique breath of the apostle. On the continent of Arid, except for those warriors who were cheated to urinate blood, the apostles are the real gods. Roar! Exclamation mark. At the moment when the power of death broke through the edge and touched the sword body, the ancient short sword suddenly trembled violently. The attacker roared out from the sword body like an ancient beast. The power of death dissipated instantly. At the same time, the goddess of death was also shocked and retreated again and again, and the flesh and blood on her body began to fall off piece by piece. It looked like a zombie in the movie. Is the apostle's breath so cool? The flesh was shaken off by a roar. Kinluo looked at the broken body of the goddess of death, and couldn't help but mutter in his heart. Inexplicably, there was a bad premonition. The goddess of death stood still, and the black breath of death emanated from the sickle in her hand. Kinluo immediately came back to his senses when he felt the danger. Seeing that the goddess of death was about to attack again, Kinluo decisively took the lead. Grabbing the demon prison blood kill behind him, the blood blade fiercely slapped the goddess of death. Boom! The demon prison blood kill slapped the goddess of death to the ground, and the attacker's blood column that soared into the sky was formed. The violent blood power continuously washed over the body of the goddess of death. Almost every wash could bring down a large piece of flesh and blood from the goddess of death. Soon, 2/3 of the flesh and blood around the goddess of death disappeared, revealing jade-like white bones. Only the key parts were still attached with flesh and blood. At this speed, it was only a matter of time before the goddess of death became a specimen. But Kinluo would not wait foolishly. The wave power around Kinluo surged. Under the addition of the dark sky wave eye, the combo unique to the Azurus series began to be performed. Wave Sword, Amaterasu. Wave Sword, Thorn Wheel. Wave Sword, Light Wings. Wave Sword, Flash Gun. Under the continuous attacks, the flesh and blood of the goddess of death began to disappear more quickly. Chapter 160, Facing Tony and the Others. The Silver Surfer could maintain a relaxed and even playful attitude. After all, the gap in strength was there. No matter how powerful Spider-Man and the others would become in the future, they had to admit that even if they were tied together now, they were no match for the Silver Surfer. But Johnny and Old Carter were different. Whether it was the Holy Spirit flame or the Underworld flame, the Silver Surfer sensed danger, even life-threatening danger. Silver light flashed in the Silver Surfer's eyes, and the skin of his body began to ripple slowly like water ripples. Looking for death, Seeing the changes in the Silver Surfer, Old Carter fired directly. Boom! The dark purple underworld flame fireball blasted out, directly blasting the Silver Surfer away. Johnny then made a move, and the long sword condensed by the Holy Spirit flame in his hand slashed in the air, and a crescent-shaped flame slashed out and fell heavily on the Silver Surfer. Under the combined attack of the two, the Silver Surfer flew backwards for nearly 1,000 meters before he stopped. The underworld flame and the Holy Spirit flame attached to the Silver Surfer's body and burned violently. From a distance, it looked like a dyed thunderbolt. Bang! Suddenly, a loud noise came from the Silver Surfer's body, and the flames surrounding him exploded directly. In the flames, the Silver Surfer walked out intact. Johnny and Old Carter saw the flames in their eyes jumping constantly. They were obviously a little shocked, but they didn't know that the Silver Surfer had really shed a layer of skin just now. The Silver Surfer's skin is very special and contains powerful defensive capabilities. At the critical moment, it can also shed its skin to avoid injury. It can be said to be quite troublesome, but Odin was relieved at this time. With these two Ghost Riders, everything will be easy. At least the Silver Surfer can't pose any threat to them. Johnny, Old Carter, why are you here? Aren't you still in a coma? Are you okay now? May Parker breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Johnny and Old Carter with concern. Don't worry, Ms. May. We are fine, but now there are some troubles. While Old Carter was speaking, his eyes were always fixed on Galactus. Johnny didn't say anything, but from the flames that kept accumulating on his body, it can be seen that he was almost extremely nervous at this time. There is no way not to be nervous. Mephisto used to be a ceiling-level existence for them. Although their strength has been improved under Kinlawo's influence, they have reached the level of being able to fight Mephisto. But the one in front of him is a god, one of the 5 strongest beings in the universe. Mephisto is nothing in front of him. 2 evil Ghost Riders, and there is a death power close to death. It's interesting. This planet is really prone to interesting things. The eyes of the planet devourer were locked on Old Carter, and a trace of inexplicable meaning flashed in his eyes. Come on, aren't you evil Ghost Riders known as immortal? Let me try. How are you immortal? The voice of the planet devourer fell, and his figure flashed and appeared in front of Old Carter and Johnny. He didn't even make a move, but just the pressure blasted Johnny and Old Carter away. Fortunately, Venom reacted quickly and caught the two with a swing of his tail. However, the powerful impact caused Venom to tremble violently. In the end, Venom still couldn't withstand the impact of this force. It forcibly released its transformed state and fell downwards like a puddle of mud. Spider-Man immediately swung up the spider silk to catch Venom and took it into his body. Venom quickly adjusted in Spider-Man's body. It turned into a battlesuit and covered Spider-Man's body. At this time, Galactus raised his hand, and the colorful light gathered. The cosmic energy gradually condensed into a substantial sphere, emitting a terrifying power. However, at this moment, a golden spear was directly in front of Galactus. The golden light shone. It soon turned into a light shield that enveloped Galactus. Then Odin suddenly appeared and picked up the suspended spear, but the golden light did not mean to diminish at all, but instead shone even more. Odin, have you decided to fight me? Galactus stretched out his hand and directly tore off a large piece of golden energy. He took a bite in his mouth like eating a pancake and said. Odin did not speak, but the determination in his one eye was enough to explain everything. Seeing this, Galactus' face turned cold. He punched hard. The golden light shield exploded completely. It turned into golden light waves and scattered. Odin was affected by this and retreated more than 10 meters before he could stabilize his body. Blood slid from the corner of his mouth, and his face turned red and white. Maypark and others were fine. Thanks to Johnny and Old Carter's timely action, they blocked the impact of this energy. At this time, Silver Surfer stood beside Galactus, looking at everyone with a meaningful look in his eyes. But soon his eyes were locked on the void on the side. There was a purple light flashing there that ordinary people could not easily detect. You go first. I will summon the Rainbow Bridge to take you away, and I will hold Galactus. Odin recalled the Spear of Eternity, and at the same time, the voice reached the ears of Maypark and others. Maypark and others looked at each other and shook their heads firmly. Lord God King, Please don't bother with the Earth. We will protect it ourselves. Perhaps you should take your two precious sons and leave first. Maypark and Tony said almost at the same time. Odin was very anxious when he heard this. He didn't expect the result to be like this. Even an egg hitting a stone doesn't make such a bang. Suddenly, the devourer of planets tapped the void with his finger, and the surrounding space was directly blocked. The whole world turned into a colorful world. Chapter 327. The style suddenly changed and the ancient world suddenly changed. It really caught everyone off guard, especially Tony and Spider-Man. They really hadn't seen such a way to change the world. For a moment, they couldn't help but feel a little flustered, and Odin's eyes were full of dejection. He knew very well what the purpose of the Devourer of Planets was. Now he couldn't feel the existence of the Rainbow Bridge, let alone any summons. To put it bluntly, they are now a group of lambs to be slaughtered, and the Devourer of Planets is the butcher with a knife. He, the strongest being, is at best a leader. What can he do against the butcher? However, at this moment, a crisp voice suddenly sounded, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Hey, what's going on? Why is there such a strong cosmic power? Have I traveled through time? A purple light flashed not far away, and then Ganada's figure flashed from the purple light. Looking at the colorful world, her face was full of surprise and disbelief. Father, it's you. Why are you here on Earth again? But when she saw her father, Devourer of Planets, she suddenly realized, and then a little vigilance appeared in her eyes. This look really made Devourer, the old father, feel heartbroken. What am I here for? Of course, I came to see you. This useless thing, just a big mushroom, made you fall asleep. Are you still my daughter? Devourer of Planets said with a look of disappointment. Oh, I haven't eaten so much for a long time, and I'm not used to it. Ganada blushed immediately after hearing this, and said embarrassedly, You, what can I say to you? You have to come to this shabby place to suffer. I am not full, how can I not let you eat? The Devourer looked at his daughter with both heartache and helplessness. However, everyone saw this scene, can't help but be a little confused. Chapter 161. As Galactus spoke, a terrifying aura emanated from his body, and the entire sky began to tremble because of his power. The people on the ground had no idea what was happening. They only felt that the heaven and earth were trembling, and they were so scared that they began to take emergency shelter, thinking that some alien creatures had invaded again. Odin's heart stomped, and the situation he feared the most had happened. For a moment, he couldn't help but struggle, whether to risk his life to stop Galactus, or just give up the Earth and go back to Asgard to play dead. May Parker and others who had just dealt with the big mushroom were rushing back. Suddenly, they felt a breath of destruction emanating from the world. Several people looked at each other, and they all secretly said in their hearts that it was not good. They started to rush back at all costs. Soon they saw Galactus and Odin with a gloomy face. Although they didn't know Galactus, they had some understanding of the Silver Surfer beside Galactus. After all, there are not many such beings in the entire universe. Kinlawo told them the story of the Silver Surfer and Galactus. So thinking of the Silver Surfer, the identity of the strong man in special armor in front of him couldn't be clearer. Where did these three humans come from? Are you looking for death? The Devourer of Planets looked at Maypark and others, and the displeasure on his face became even more serious. I'll deal with them. Silver Surfer heard this and said very excitedly, No, they are all people around Kinlawo. If anything happens to them, Kinlawo will definitely go crazy. Odin waved his hand and said. At the same time, he made a decision in his heart. He had to protect the Earth at the cost of his life. If Maypark and others hadn't appeared, Odin might still be hesitant. If they didn't appear, Odin could completely ignore the Earth and just use the Rainbow Bridge to save the people around Kinlawo. It was just right to take them with him when saving Thor and Loki. Anyway, the Earth was destroyed, and he protected the people around Kinlawo and brought them to Asgard. Kinlawo wouldn't say anything, but would be grateful to him. But after they appeared, Odin couldn't hesitate. If they get into trouble in front of him, Kinlawo will definitely not let him go. Either way, it's a death. It's better to choose a more heroic one. Humphrey. So what if he's crazy? It's as if I'm afraid of him. Galactus snorted coldly, and then winked at the Silver Surfer beside him. The Silver Surfer understood instantly and nodded slightly. He rushed straight towards Tony and others, exuding waves of murderous intent. Seeing that the Silver Surfer was coming with ill intentions, several people immediately became alert. Venom didn't say anything and started charging directly. At this time, he hadn't yet lifted the transformation of the Leviathan. The huge body was like a swimming dragon, and it slammed into the Silver Surfer fiercely. Spider-Man and May Parker were also ready to attack on Venom's back. Bang! With a loud bang, Venom hit the Silver Surfer. But the imagined situation of knocking him out did not happen. At this time, the Silver Surfer held down Venom's huge head with both hands, and didn't even take a step back. Storm kick, wild wind, May Parker shouted, her whole body covered with armament hockey. She jumped into the air, and kicked out countless storm kicks. It swept through the body of the Silver Surfer like a wild wind. Sizzled, sizzled, the wind blades of the storm kicks landed on the body of the Silver Surfer, making a very harsh sound. Sparks appeared out of thin air, but they never broke through the skin of the Silver Surfer. However, at this moment, a figure came up from the bottom. Passing through the wild wind like storm kicks, a rising dragon punch hit the chin of the Silver Surfer directly. Bang! There was another loud noise, and the Silver Surfer's head couldn't help but lift up a little, but it soon returned to normal. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the sneak attack of the little spider. At this time, the little spider was also a little surprised. He never expected that his charged attack would only make the opponent raise his chin. Fortunately, although the little spider was surprised, his perception was not affected. The little spider leaned back, and the spider silk connected to the body of Venom. Instantly, he was out of the attack range of Silver Surfer, making his attack fall in vain. Button battery, try this. Tony had accumulated energy at this time, and saw several launchers rising from his back. The light of arc pulse cannons lit up one after another. Boom, boom, boom. Several arc pulse cannons directly bombarded Silver Surfer. Under the continuous attack, Silver Surfer immediately took a few steps back, and finally left some scars on his silver skin, although it recovered in an instant. Damn it, he shouldn't be called Button Battery. He should be called Iron Turtle. This is too hard. Tony cursed with a serious face. The opponent's strength was a little beyond his imagination. Planet Devourer looked at the scene in front of him. He couldn't help but nod secretly in his heart. These humans are worthy of being Kinlawo's side. They really have some means. But it's still not enough. Silver Shadow, are you fighting in the ring? Get rid of them quickly. Planet Devourer's somewhat dissatisfied voice sounded. The Silver Surfer nodded, then raised his hand, and the silver cosmic energy began to gather rapidly, emitting a terrifying power that made people shudder. Odin could no longer sit still. He gritted his teeth, picked up the Spear of Eternity and was about to attack, but just as he made a move, he was held down by the mocking Devourer. Just watch the show, don't move, otherwise, I don't mind taking action myself to deal with those humans. Stop, otherwise I'll kill you. Just as the energy in the palm of the Silver Surfer was about to gather and form, two cold voices rang out in succession. Then a blue flaming long knife was placed on his neck. At the same time, a hand cannon burning with dark purple flames was placed on his head. Chapter 326. Odin took action and attacked with an egg against a stone. It was none other than Johnny and Old Carter. Johnny and Old Carter, who were still in a coma, after feeling the breath of the Devourer, they were awakened on the spot. Compared to Tony and others, Johnny and Old Carter have barely reached the threshold of the Father God level, so they are much more sensitive to the breath of gods. The two realized that something was wrong and immediately transformed and attacked. Fortunately, they were not far from the hero apartment. At full speed, they arrived here in almost an instant. As a result, they saw the Silver Surfer gathering energy to bombard May Parker and others. Seeing this, the two attacked decisively without hesitation. This is how the scene just now happened. Chapter 162. It's simply incredible. Even with the assistance of the Infinity Stones, it is enough to amaze the gods. For a moment, the goddess of death felt that she had underestimated the human wizard. Talent, such talent, must be controlled in her own hands. Apart from anything else, just relying on this understanding of the power of space, he is qualified to be her subordinate. But now is not the time to think about these things. The most urgent task is to get rid of the difficult human in front of him. After crushing the spear that was shooting at her, the goddess of death suddenly realized that Kinlawo had appeared above the death tornado at some point. Grab a long sword suspended in the air in your hand. Chapter 324 God's Watch. Star Devourer returns to the deep universe of the Earth. The devourer of planets, who had just devoured a planet and had not yet digested it, slowly opened his eyes. He felt the special fluctuations of the Ancient One's mark. He didn't want to pay attention to it. After all, it was purely an accident that the Ancient One obtained his power. It was completely the result of him stealing the chicken and losing the rice. So for the dynamics of the Ancient One, the devourer of planets has an instinctive resistance. He simply wouldn't even take a second look. And the Ancient One's use of this power was so rude and frequent that the devourer of planets would pay even less attention. But when he felt the power of the Infinity Stones, the devourer of planets had to pay attention. After all, those things are likely to cause some changes in the universe. He looked into the distance with a deep gaze. The scene that appeared in front of him made him reveal a bit of surprise on his face. Good boy, you actually confronted death so quickly. Are you going to offend all 5 gods? You're too fast, the devourer of planets murmured. He looked at the battle more seriously. The more he looked at the devourer of planets, the more frightened he was. He didn't expect Kinlawo to be able to burst out with such power. It's okay to be able to confront the goddess of death head-on, but he actually suppressed the other party. He could even crack the death plunder of the goddess of death. Interesting. It's really interesting. It's so enjoyable. The devourer of planets turned into a melon-eating crowd. He quickly asked several of his men to hunt for some small planets as melon seeds. As time went by, when Kinlawo burst out his awakening skills, the devourer of planets shook his head, threw a small planet into his mouth and knocked it a few times. He looked at the Silver Surfer who was also watching the show and said, "Silver Shadow, who do you think will win between the goddess of death and Kinlawo?" "I think it's the goddess of death." "Oh, why?" "Now that bastard Kinlawo has the upper hand." When he said this, a gleam of light flashed in the eyes of the devourer of planets, and a playful look appeared on his face. "I have seen the true power of the goddess of death with you, and she didn't seem to burst out with all her strength." The Silver Surfer thought for a while and said, "At this time." The Silver Surfer's eyes obviously had more human brilliance than before, since the loss of the cosmic surfboard. I don't know what he was thinking. The devourer of planets thought again, and finally decided to lift some of his restrictions. The Silver Surfer now has his own thoughts and is no longer a robot. It's just that the memories of the past have not been restored. Ha ha ha. Silver Shadow, you're right. Don't think Kinlawo is arrogant now. When death mobilizes the power of the kingdom of death, he may not be able to hold on. Devourer laughed and said, it seemed that he had thought of Kinlawo's bad luck, and he was so happy, but now the whole hell is blocked by the supreme sorcerer with the infinity stones, and the kingdom of death can't get close at all. How can the goddess of death mobilize the power of the kingdom of death? Silver Surfer asked in confusion. Death is the kingdom of death itself, or the kingdom of death is just a part of death, and the one outside is just a manifestation, Devourer said, and threw another small planet into his mouth. If that's the case, why didn't the goddess of death mobilize the power of the kingdom of death earlier? She wouldn't have to toss with Kinlawo for so long. The doubts on the face of the Silver Surfer were even more. From his perspective, he really couldn't understand the choice of the goddess of death at this time. You have a lot of problems. Forget it. I'm in a good mood today, so I'll tell you. Death doesn't like to mobilize the power of the kingdom of death. She seems to hate the way she uses that power. Sometimes I don't quite understand why she dislikes me, but that guy's brain is different from ours. Last time I asked him a question, he directly troubled me for thousands of years, just like those so-called psychopaths in the world. Hearing what Galactus said, Silver Surfer nodded thoughtfully, and then fell into deep thought. Seeing that Silver Surfer didn't reply for a long time, Galactus couldn't help but ask curiously, you are like a chatterbox for a while, and then you were silent. What are you thinking about now? So serious? Didn't I tell you in the end, Master Galactus? I was thinking that if there is something with Kinlawo, the reaction of the lady will not be too good. especially when she knows that you are standing by and watching the show. A glimmer of light flashed in the eyes of Silver Surfer, but on the surface he spoke seriously. Thinking of his daughter's reaction, the Devourer of Planets was instantly not calm, and he took a breath of cold air. He didn't care about eating planets anymore. He stood up and paced back and forth in the universe, with a bit of entanglement on his face. He was very happy to see Kinluo in trouble, but he had to take care of the problem on Ganada's side. After all, he only had one daughter. If he broke up with Kinluo completely because of this little thing, it would definitely be more trouble than gain. The Devourer of Planets knew his daughter very well, and she really dared to break up with him. What do you think about Silver Shadow? After thinking for a moment, the Devourer of Planets looked at the Silver Surfer beside him and asked, "Now Miss Ganada is sleeping because she swallowed the big mushroom. Maybe we can wake her up, and then let her take the initiative to ask you to go to hell to rescue Kinluo. Maybe you can take this opportunity to bring Miss Ganada back to your side." The Silver Surfer said with a serious face. "Good idea. Let's do it. Let's go to Earth now." Galactus clapped his hands, nodding his head with a look of joy on his face. Then he looked at his other subordinates and said, "Silver Shadow and I will go out for a while, and you guys continue to look for planets. Don't be lazy. Welcome Ganada when we come back." "Yes, Lord Galactus." N. Galactus's subordinates knelt down and agreed. Then Galactus took Silver Shadow and smashed the space with a punch, crossing over to the Earth. The sky above New York. TVB Novel Network. Galactus felt the vitality and breath of life on this planet, and nodded. "It's a great place. No wonder Ganada is so nostalgic for it." However, at this moment, a rainbow fell from the sky and landed directly in front of Galactus. Chapter 325 The God King is helpless and makes trouble. The light of the rainbow flashed. Odin walked out of the rainbow with a hint of helplessness. He bowed slightly to Devourer and said, "Mr. Devourer, why do you come to Earth again? Kinluo and Ancient One are not on Earth at the moment." "What, I can't come to Earth? Or do you think that I dare not come when Kinluo and Ancient One are here?" Devourer looked at Odin with a somewhat unhappy look on his face. Hearing this, Odin's heart couldn't help but tremble. In this situation, it is almost impossible for him to stop Devourer from doing something just by his own words. And he can't contact Kinluo and Ancient One, so he is so uncertain. "To tell you the truth, I came here to devour the Earth this time. What can you do?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163. The sickle suddenly brought a burst of black light. It looked quite similar to Kinluo's air-breaking sword drawing slash. Seeing this, Kinluo simply used the air-breaking sword drawing slash to fight against the death harvest of the goddess of death. The long sword in his hand slashed violently. The dazzling sword light spread out. The black breath of death and the white sword light collided in midair. Suddenly, an extremely dazzling light burst out. The two forces were deadlocked in midair, almost evenly matched. Kinluo made another move at this time. His figure suddenly rose a distance upward. At the same time, the power of ghost energy attached to the long sword. Tombstone 3 Absolute Formation. Kinluo pointed the long sword in his hand to the sky. Suddenly, 3 extremely huge tombstones fell from the sky in a triangular shape. The tombstones were extremely large, and almost every tombstone was a few points larger than a country with a good life. The goddess of death felt the suppressive power of the tombstones and did not dare to be careless. After all, she had suffered too much from Kinluo. As the death sickle in his hand was waving wildly, several death tornadoes appeared out of thin air and surrounded the goddess of death. Chapter 323 3 Series Awakening, Fusion Gems. The death tornado surrounded the goddess of death. Carrying extremely terrifying power, 3 huge tombstones fell from the sky. Before they could get close to the goddess of death, they were crushed into ghost power by the strangling power in the tornado. Kinluo immediately mobilized the power of fluctuations. The ice pole, wave-breaking sword and the extreme wave-breaking sword were used one after another. The sky-high ice pillars and huge fireballs fell from the sky. They directly bombarded the death tornadoes around the goddess of death. The power of ice and fire continued to break under the howling wind, which looked like a grand fireworks show. However, with the power of the ice pole, wave-breaking sword and the extreme wave-breaking sword, the defense of the death tornado was still not broken. However, these two skills contain extremely powerful control. Although the defense of the death tornado was not broken, the control in it slowed it down. If the speed of the death tornado just now was that of a sports car, it was now at best the level of a mountain bike. The death goddess at the center naturally saw that her own power was affected. She immediately inserted the sickle in her hand into the ground. Suddenly a black mist spread out, and the surrounding death tornadoes were affected by the black mist and began to gather towards the death goddess. The death tornadoes combined with each other, and in less than half a second, they had already gathered into a super large death tornado. It covered the area where Kinluo was. Feeling the terrifying power contained in it, Kinluo did not hesitate at all and directly opened three big moves: Extreme, Ghost Sword Art, Storm Style, Demon Prison Blood Kill, Dark Sky Wave Eye. With the release of the three awakening skills, with Kinluo as the center, the space began to shatter inch by inch. In such a long time, this was the first time that Kinluo directly released the awakening skills of the three series. Such a magnificent power. Even Kinluo almost couldn't control it. The familiar word kill appeared above his head, and the blood blade also appeared behind him. Since Kinluo had already completed the breakthrough of Emperor Blood Killing Heaven, the restrictions of Demon Prison Blood Killing had changed a lot. Now the blood blade that Kinluo directly summoned was the complete version of the blood blade, and there was no need to absorb the power of blood to slowly form it. The sword formation composed of 24 swords also enveloped the goddess of death and the huge death tornado. The spread of the death tornado came to an abrupt end. The death tornado and the storm sword formation of the extreme ghost swordsmanship kept colliding. The terrifying energy scattered, causing the entire hell to undergo changes like moving mountains and filling the sea. At the same time, the entire world was completely dark because of the dark sky wave eye. The only pity is that the power of the goddess of death is too special, and the dark sky wave eye cannot directly deprive the opponent of the five senses. However, under the suppression of the dark sky wave eye, the perception of the goddess of death has also decreased by more than a little bit. Both the reaction speed and the perception of external information have become dull. At this time, Guyi's hand was almost bleeding from the seal, and she tried her best to maintain the stability of the space of hell. But facing the collision of Kinluo and Lady Death with such power, she was never able to repair it as fast as she was able to destroy it, and hell began to collapse again. Suddenly, Guyi stopped making seals. A hint of cruelty flashed in his eyes. He slapped the cosmic cube floating in front of him. Crack! A sound like glass breaking rang out. The cosmic cube shattered directly, and the blue crystal fragments flew away with the wind, replaced by a deep blue gem. This is the true face of the space gem, and the external cosmic cube is just a disguise. With the appearance of the space gem, the space power emitted from it was instantly raised to a higher level. At the same time, Guyi used his sword finger to cut through the colored mark on his forehead, and then embedded the space gem in it. The moment the two combined, the huge pain made Guyi involuntarily scream to the sky. In an instant, Guyi's body exuded a deep blue space power, and his 9 orifices turned blue. Now what she had to do was to use the cosmic energy at her forehead to completely explode the power of the space gem. Although the power of Guyi itself is enough to exert the full power of the space gem, but to achieve it once and for all, it still requires a huge amount of energy burst in an instant, and she still cannot do it with the remaining secret magic energy. Therefore, the cosmic mark at the center of the eyebrows is the best choice and her only choice. However, doing so will be somewhat dangerous. If Guyi's body cannot withstand the energy impact of the space gem, it is very likely to disappear on the spot. The space of the entire hell will also be shattered. Fortunately, Guyi withstood the explosion of this power, even if the process was a bit painful, but she still withstood it. Feeling the space power in her body like an ocean, Guyi, who turned into a little blue man, immediately pressed his hands on the void. In an instant, The blue light wave spread. It enveloped the entire hell at a speed visible to the naked eye. Under the infusion of such a large amount of space power, the dense space cracks between Kinluo and the goddess of death were all restored at a speed visible to the naked eye. The space of the entire hell has returned to its original state again. But the broken world is irreversible. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, hell is a shabby place. It's better to be broken into pieces. Wave sword? Flash gun. Kinluo felt the changes in the surrounding space, and a gleam of light flashed in his eyes. He raised his hand, and several long spears condensed by the wave force whistled towards the goddess of death. At this time, the goddess of death was also shocked by the changes in space. She didn't expect that a mere human mage could use the power of space to such an extent. A godlike battle can be maintained. Chapter 164. Although these beings are just phantoms, the power they exude is completely like the breath of gods. It's just that they are not formal gods. Even the goddess of death felt a very similar breath of another god on the evil god holding a knife and axe. Even she didn't dare to have too much contact with that god. Even the goddess of death has been doubting for a long time whether she is a vassal of that god. Just when the goddess of death was in a trance, several ghosts and gods turned into streams and merged into Kinluo's body. In an instant, Kinluo's power began to soar. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. It was 8 times stronger before it stopped. At this time, the breath exuded by Kinluo's body made the whole hell tremble. It even overwhelmed the goddess of death. The ability to integrate the power of ghosts and gods into oneself is the ultimate use of the Dark Lord's Ghost Control Extreme. Just wanting to fully exert the power of Ghost Control Extreme is not such an easy thing. If Kinluo hadn't completely mastered the power of the Ghost Bride and obtained Jiger's absolute recognition in advance, and the absolute control of the Ghost Hand over the ghosts and gods, it is almost impossible to launch this move before summoning Jig. After all, with the fucked up personalities of those ghosts and gods, it is impossible to lend him power easily. Even if they can lend it to him, they will definitely cause trouble in the end. Backlash and other situations of killing the master are really not a big deal for the ghosts and gods. Kinluo felt the power filling his body and showed a confident smile on his face. He can last for a long time in this state, and there are no side effects. It's so cool. And this is the 7 ghosts and gods coming. Kinluo can hardly imagine what it will be like when he summons Jig. The 9 ghosts are all activated and coming. Chapter 322. The idea of mouth cannon attack and bombardment of 9 ghosts coming. It can only be put on hold for the time being. There is no way with Kinluo's current physical condition. 7 ghosts coming is almost the limit, but it is certainly not impossible to integrate the power of Brashu. It's just that the burden on the body is a bit heavy, and Kinluo can't maintain the state of 8 ghosts coming for a long time. Otherwise, it is very likely to be eroded by the power of ghosts and gods, leading to a series of problems. What's more, the current Brashu is still in the ban. Kinluo didn't even think of opening it. Are you kidding? Without Brashu, the egg yolk can't make a trough cake? Kinluo has a trump card. Don't forget that he still has a big move that he hasn't used. Holding the ancient dagger, Kinluo rushed straight to the goddess of death. During the attack, the ancient dagger changed again and turned directly into the appearance of the sword of gods and demons. Speaking of it, after using so many weapons, Kinluo still thinks that this kind of long sword is the most convenient to use. Ding! Kinluo slashed with a sword, and the goddess of death directly blocked it with the sickle of death. However, at this moment, various colors of light appeared on the long sword. Pullman's defense reduction, Carlo's dark flame, Saya's frost, and other ghost and god powers attached to this sword. Feeling such a complex power, the goddess of death was slightly stunned. She didn't expect Kinluo's attack this time to become so colorful. It integrates the power of ghosts and gods. Kinluo has not only improved in strength, he has also mastered some of the characteristics of the ghosts and gods, and he can attach them to the attack. Even an ordinary slash can burst out with great power when the power of the ghosts and gods is added. Suddenly, the goddess of death noticed the dark purple dark flame burning the sickle of death. Her pupils suddenly shrank, and she said in disbelief, "The power of hell's fire? No. The source of this power is death." "Why do you have the power of death?" "I don't have this power. Where did you get it from? When the goddess of death said this, her voice trembled unconsciously. You must know that the 5 gods are unique. They represent the purest and most fundamental powers in this world. However, now the goddess of death has seen a completely different power of death. How can she not be shocked? Although Mephisto had also seen the power of the dark flame at the beginning, but with his eyesight, he can't see what the power behind the dark flame represents. After all, he only has hell in his eyes, and how big the sky can a toad at the bottom of the well know. Hearing the words of the goddess of death, Kinluo thought about it for a while and understood what was going on. Carlo's dark flame was given by the god of death of Arid Continent. It naturally contains the power of the god of death of Arid Continent. The goddess of death is the god of death in the Marvel world. And now, seeing the existence that matches her own power, it is normal to be uncalm. Goddess of death, do you think you are the only god of death in this world? I have as much power as I want. Guess who it belongs to? Kinluo raised his hand mysteriously, and the dark flame in his palm instantly rose and turned into a huge fireball. Then Kinluo directly pressed the dark flame fireball on the body of the goddess of death. Because of Kinluo's words, she was disturbed. The goddess of death was hit by the dark flame fireball and didn't react to the problem of dodging at all. The dark flame attached to the body of the goddess of death and kept burning. Just relying on the power of the dark flame alone, it is still impossible to burn through the goddess of death and cause any fatal damage to her. Of course, Kinluo had not thought that he could solve the opponent with only the dark flame. Otherwise, this goddess of death would be too worthless. She was not the Zibai goddess of death of Kinluo's niece. Draw the sword and slash. Death Tombstone. Explosive Wave Sword. Blood Blade. Kinluo used the signature skills of the 4 series Ghost Sword in succession. He directly bombarded the goddess of death. The circular blade of the draw the sword directly cut a big gap in the arm around the waist of the goddess of death. Such a sharp effect is still thanks to the defense reduction ability of Pulamon and Luosha. With these 2 special attributes, not to mention the complete reduction of the physical defense and protective death power of the goddess of death, at least it can be reduced by more than 50%. Directly reduced by half. Countless tombstones fell from the sky and smashed the goddess of death heavily on the ground. The wave fire followed closely behind, and the violent wave flames burst into a huge skull. https://w.v'_s.net/ Finally, the blood blade hit the abdomen of the goddess of death again. The blood burst out directly on the body of the goddess of death. The blood force originally conflicted with the goddess of death. The collision between the two was like pouring water into an oil pan, and surging black smoke emanated from the goddess of death. It looked extremely spectacular. Kinluo couldn't help but give a thumbs up to his mouth cannon at this time. No wonder those protagonists like to use mouth cannons on the enemy. Good guy. It really works. Otherwise, how could the goddess of death easily withstand this series of attacks? Feeling the trauma she suffered, the goddess of death finally recovered from the shock of the strange breath of death. Looking at her own embarrassed appearance, her eyes looked at Kinluo in the sky again. The goddess of death tightly grasped the sickle in her hand and said hatefully, "Human, no matter where your death power comes from, as long as I kill you, everything will be clear." Death Harvest. The goddess of death swung the sickle in her hand and chopped towards Kinluo fiercely. Chapter 165. As a result, the space that could be easily torn apart at ordinary times was like cutting on cowhide at this time. Although there were some cracks in the space, it was not enough for her to pass through. Damn it, it's that human wizard again. The goddess of death glared fiercely in the direction of Guyi. Just as she was accumulating strength to tear the space again, Kinluo's somewhat weak voice suddenly came from behind. "Goddess of death, taste this rare power." Rumble. The violent blood power gushed out from Kinluo's body, and the violent power spread instantly. Almost half of hell was covered in it. Whether it was the sky or the ground, countless small space cracks were torn apart by this violent power. The land that was originally devastated was blasted into a bottomless pit. First, the blood of the devil fell, and now there was a bloody rage. The blood power in the world has become so dense that it has reached a certain level. Soon, the blood power turned into blood rain and fell sparsely from the sky. It looks like a sense of mourning. Bathed in the blood rain, Kinluo, who had released the bloody rage, could hardly stand up straight. Fortunately, the death power in his body was chased and intercepted by the 4 ghost sword powers, and all flowed into the ghost hand. As the death power entered the ghost hand, it quickly disappeared without a trace. As for what swallowed it, Kinluo didn't pay attention, but it was probably Kazan and the others. Brashu is impossible, and he should still be suppressed in the swamp now. Without the death power, Kinluo's constantly losing life naturally stopped. At this time, the remaining life force in his body was far less than 1% of the peak. It was not so bleak originally, but the bloody rage consumed a lot of his life force, which was originally very little. It is worthy of being called a suicide move. If it is not a special situation, Kinluo will not easily release this kind of life force consumption. What if I accidentally kill myself? Bang! A loud noise suddenly came from the deep pit. Then the goddess of death rushed out of the deep pit with a face full of anger. At this time, many cracks appeared on the black armor around the goddess of death. There was a lot of death blood slowly flowing out of the armor. At the same time, black liquid slowly flowed out of the 7 orifices on her face. It can be seen that Kinluo's extreme bloody anger just now must have caused her a lot of damage. Otherwise, there would not be so much death power flowing out. It has to be said that the goddess of death is so shaped, coupled with the hideous death sickle in her hand, it really has a bit of the feeling of the god of death. It's just that the flesh is still there. If it is completely turned into a skeleton, it will be perfect. Chapter 321 Full Blood's Resurrection, Ghosts and Gods. Human, if this is your last resort, then I can declare that the farce is over. You will pay the price for what you have done. The sickle of the goddess of death pointed directly at Kinluo, her eyes full of anger. Of course not. This has just begun. How can it end? Kinluo smiled, and the blood and energy in his body surged again. Death resistance. Consume blood and energy to restore one's own vitality. The lower the vitality, the more it will be restored, and increase one's own defense in a short time. As the life-saving magic skill was activated, the blood and energy in Kinluo's body began to quickly turn into pure vitality. Almost in the blink of an eye, he was pulled back from the state of weakness to the state of being unable to take care of himself. About 1/5 of his vitality was restored. At the same time, Kinluo took out an ordinary green bean and threw it into his mouth to chew it. Gulp! The bean dregs went into his stomach. In an instant, it turned into pure life energy, filling Kinluo's own loss. In an instant, Kinluo recovered directly from the dying state of residual blood to the state of full blood. Even the blood and energy consumed in the body were replenished to a certain extent. Kinluo also understood why the fairy beans could not cure Wukong's heart disease. This thing is the extremely compressed life energy, which can replenish a large amount of vitality in a short time, thus healing the body. But the virus, that thing, cannot be eliminated by vitality. Good. Very good. Very good. Human, you are really great. This is the first time I have met an existence that can recover from the attack of death plunder so quickly. Even those 4 guys can't do it. But this time, I won't give you a chance to breathe. Die. Seeing Kinluo resurrected with full blood, the goddess of death suddenly laughed in anger. The death sickle in her hand gathered black mist again, which was the manifestation of the power of death reaching a certain level. Kinluo saw this and said nothing, and directly slashed with Shura evil light. The X-sword light thousands of meters high flew out from the ancient short sword, driving the powerful evil light energy. However, facing such a fierce slash, the goddess of death did not dodge at all. Instead, she waved the sickle and met it head-on. The state of the goddess of death at this time was much more fierce and decisive than before. Obviously, she was really angry. With a flash of black light, Shura evil light slash was directly split in half and turned into stars and dissipated. The goddess of death quickly passed through the stars of the wave force. The figure kept flashing, and almost in the blink of an eye, it came to Kinluo's vicinity. Watching the goddess of death raise the sickle in her hand and chop towards Kinluo, the surging mist on the black breastplate kept circling the sickle. This is the rhythm of preparing to repeat the old trick and plunder his newly recovered vitality again. Kinluo smiled slightly, as if the scene was reenacted, raised the ancient dagger in his hand, and activated the blocking skill. Humphrey, seeing this scene, The goddess of death snorted disdainfully. She was extremely disdainful of Kinluo's iron-headed behavior. Ding! The sickle blade collided with Kinluo's sword blade, making an unusually crisp sound, and sparks scattered. Then the black mist immediately disappeared without a trace on the sickle. This time was slightly different from before. The black mists before were silently integrated into Kinluo's body, but this time it was blatantly wrapped around him. The goddess of death stood with a knife in hand, looking at Kinluo, who was already covered with black mist, with a sneer on her face full of disdain. Haha, what's the difference in the result this time? What's the point of struggling to death? I say, woman, don't be too confident, and don't treat your buddy as a saint. See ya. Since I dare to take the challenge, I have a way to deal with you. Kinluo shook his head with a confident smile on his face. Without waiting for the goddess of death to reply, Kinluo raised his ghost hand and smashed it hard on his chest. A bunch of guys who eat for free, come out and pay the rent. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled sound, the 7 ghost marks on the ghost hand lit up faintly, and then the power unique to ghosts and gods was transmitted from the marks into his body. The next second, the black mist around Kinluo dissipated directly. The disdainful look of the goddess of death disappeared immediately, and was replaced by solemnity. She really didn't expect that Kinluo could defeat the power of death plunder so easily. Kinluo's eyes were flashing with dark purple light at this time. Then the light of the 7 ghost marks increased again. The figures of ghosts appeared behind Kinluo one by one. Kazan, Brad, Carlo, Luasha, Saya, Pullman, Kajia. The moment she saw these figures, the goddess of death instantly understood why Kinluo could easily break his own death plunder. Chapter 166. Why do I feel awkward for no reason? Kinluo simply shut up, manipulated the power of blood, and directly attacked the final blow of the demon blood meteorite. Boom! The blood power spread and the land exploded instantly, forming a sea of blood that soared into the sky. The power contained in this sea of blood is extremely powerful. Even the space reinforced by Guyi was hit by the blood sea and cracks appeared. Guyi, who was far away on the edge of hell, felt such power and his face changed. He worked harder to control the cosmic magic and infused the power of space into it to prevent the Death Kingdom from taking advantage of the opportunity. The goddess of death, who was waiting for Kinluo's reply, obviously did not expect that Kinluo's move actually had a backhand. https://w.v'_s.net/1 was not careful and was hit directly by the blood sea. It can be said that the goddess of death directly ate up the power of the demon blood meteorite. As the blood sea turned into blood power again and dispersed, the figure of the goddess of death appeared in the air. The goddess of death looked quite embarrassed at this time. The fog of death dissipated. The black gauze dress on her body was torn, revealing a lot of white. The most notable thing was the skirt from the waist down, which was almost completely blown away. Black liquid also flowed from the corner of her mouth. That was the embodiment of the power of death condensed into liquid, which can also be understood as the blood of the goddess of death. Claw of death. The goddess of death looked at Kinluo with cold eyes and uttered these words gently. In an instant, 3 black claw marks fell from the sky and bombarded Kinluo directly. Feeling the terrifying power contained in it, Kinluo did not dare to be careless and directly activated the ghost step. It made himself enter a state of invincibility for a short time. Then he released the ghost flash skill. The whole person turned into an X-shaped sword light and instantly appeared behind the goddess of death. The ghost sword light that was always unfavorable did not affect the goddess of death at all, because at the moment Kinluo made a move, the goddess of death had already blocked Kinluo's attack with the power of death. The goddess of death was a little surprised that Kinluo disappeared in this space in an instant, and then appeared again inconceivably, but the anger in her heart made her have no time to care about those things. She only had one idea now. That was to kill the stubborn human in front of her and bring him directly to the kingdom of death. Thinking in her heart, the goddess of death burst out with a strong power of death. However, this time the power of death did not spread. Instead, it condensed around her, almost in the blink of an eye. The goddess of death was covered in a black leather armor. At the same time, a huge sickle appeared in her hand. It was just that the sickle was completely covered in a black mist, and its appearance could not be seen clearly, but it could still be distinguished from the appearance that it was a sickle. The sickle was almost several times larger than the goddess of death. Holding it in her hand, it looked extremely discordant. But the power contained in it made Kinmowo's heart shudder. He could clearly feel the terrifying power contained in the sickle. It really made Kinmowo feel like he was approaching death. Death plunder. The goddess of death flashed and appeared in front of Kinmowo. The sickle in her hand chopped down, and at the same time, it drove the terrifying black fog, wrapped around Kinmowo's body. Kinmowo didn't think about it, and the long sword in his hand changed into a giant sword. He directly blocked the attack of the goddess of death. The two collided. Suddenly, the world was shaken. Kinmowo also felt a surge of blood in his body, but fortunately he had the special power of blocking. He didn't suffer any damage. However, just when he wanted to take this opportunity to counterattack, he suddenly felt something wrong. The vitality in his body was draining away as fast as a flood. The speed was extremely terrifying. Almost in the blink of an eye, most of his vitality was lost. Kinmowo looked at the goddess of death. He found that there was a hint of pride in her eyes at this time. Kinmowo's heart sank secretly. This time he was really careless. Chapter 320 The Secret of Life Plunder. The Extreme Bloody Rage. The goddess of death licked her red lips, looking at Kinmowo, who was constantly emitting the breath of life. In addition to pride, there was also excitement in her eyes. For her, the harvest of many lives has not aroused any interest. But for a life as close to God as Kinmowo, she is still very interested in harvesting it herself. Kinmowo covered his chest, endured the severe pain from his heart and slowly stood up. The four-element power in his body began to madly attack the death power that plundered his life. Even though Kinmowo's four-element power is very strong, but that death power is also very special. It still takes a certain amount of time to clean it up. However, judging from the speed at which Kinmowo's vitality is lost, when the four-element ghost sword destroys that power, he should almost start the feast. At this time, Kinmowo noticed that the black mist on the sickle in the hands of the goddess of death had disappeared completely. Presumably, the power that invaded his body was the black mist attached to the sickle. The sickle was black and gray, wrapped in bones and some unknown metal, and the blade was shining with cold light. Just one glance would give people the illusion that they would be beheaded in the next second. What kind of power is that black mist on the sickle? I have blocked it, but it still invaded my body. Kinmowo stared at the ferocious sickle and asked, "Is it important?" "In 1 minute at most, you will be in my arms." "I am a little excited just thinking about it." The goddess of death carried the sickle and smiled softly. "Of course it is important. You can't let me die in obscurity. At least you have to let me die clearly." Kinmowo also smiled and spoke with a trembling voice. It was just because of the loss of a large amount of vitality that Kinmowo's face was as pale as paper. Smiling was even uglier than crying. But the goddess of death didn't care about Kinmowo's expression. She lightly tapped her plump red lips and nodded, saying, "Okay, then let you die knowingly." "My weapon is called the Scythe of Death, which has the power to forcibly plunder vitality. As long as they are within a certain range, no matter who they are, they will be hit. Even those four guys are no exception, but their vitality is too special. I can't plunder too much. I can only take a little bit." https://w.tvts.net/ As she said this, the goddess of death stretched out her thumb and index finger and gently tapped Kinmowo. "I understand. That is to say, as long as the distance is not too close, and use the power comparable to that of a god to resist your death plunder, it will be fine, right?" Kinmowo nodded slightly, and got the answer he wanted, and the smile on his face became a little more. Seeing the smile on Kinmowo's face, the goddess of death couldn't help but frown, and she had an inexplicable ominous premonition in her heart. "What do you mean? Do you think you still have the power to resist with your current strength?" The goddess of death stared at Kinmowo, and her tone was no longer relaxed as before. Kinmowo gave her a more and more dangerous feeling at this time, even more dangerous than when his vitality was at its peak just now. "Actually, I should thank you. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid it would be difficult for me to see the true limit of blood rage. My skill is a little special. The lower the vitality, the stronger the power," Kinmowo said, and the blood and energy around him began to gather towards his palm. The red light surrounded Kinluo's body, which was quite a bit like the violent feeling in those old versions of the game. If the goddess of death couldn't react at this time and Kinluo wanted to counterattack near death, then he would be a fool. The power displayed by Kinluo this time made even the goddess of death feel a little scared. There was no hesitation. The goddess of death waved the sickle in her hand, and suddenly a black light fell from the sky and chopped towards Kinluo. At the same time, the sickle chopped backwards, trying to tear the space and leave the original place. Chapter 167. At the same time, the entire space of hell was blocked by the power of space, and Guyi also used some of the power of mirror space. It made hell completely independent and became an independent world, completely disconnected from the outside world of death. It is not so simple for the two worlds to merge, at least it is not something that the goddess of death can do with a wave of her hand. Faced with such a result, thinking of being defeated by a human who is regarded as an ant, the face of the goddess of death gradually became gloomy. She looked at Kinluo with unkind eyes. Faced with Kinluo's repeated resistance, her patience was almost exhausted. The fingers of the goddess of death closed. The surrounding space seemed to be oppressed by something, and it actually suppressed Kinluo directly. It looks like Gaara's early killer move Sand-Binding Coffin in Naruto, but it is a super invincible and super enhanced version. After all, the goddess of death suppresses space. Just when Kinluo wanted to make a move to break it, the originally suppressed space around him seemed to be affected by something. It was strangely restored to its original state. It was like smoothing out a crumpled piece of paper. Kinluo knew this was the credit of Guyi, and he couldn't help but secretly give a nod of praise in his heart. This assistant is absolutely competent. Compared with the smiling Kinluo, the face of the goddess of death became even more gloomy. She couldn't help but feel a little regretful. It would have been better to kill the troublesome mage earlier. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as troublesome as it is now. At the same time, the goddess of death made a secret decision in her heart that when the mage arrived in the kingdom of death, she must greet him well. Let the mage know what will happen if he offends a god. Suddenly Kinluo's heart was shocked. The power of the demon blood meteorite has been accumulated. It's time to release it. Kinluo looked at the goddess of death with a torch-like gaze, and then waved his hand. In an instant, the blood ball that was tens of thousands of meters wide fell from the sky, looking like a blood-colored meteorite. Almost instantly, the obstructing death giant was crushed and exploded, and turned into the fog of death again. However, the fog of death was soon swept by the power of the demon blood meteorite and finally dissipated. The goddess of death felt the energy contained in the blood, and her face changed slightly. The speed of this power growth was even beyond her imagination. If she was not careful, she might be injured by this majestic blood power. After all, the power of the two is essentially in conflict. But after feeling the falling speed of the demon blood meteorite, the goddess of death's originally serious face eased a little. At this speed, it's okay to hit some ants, but it's still too much to hit a god head-on. The goddess of death burst out with death fog around her body, and the fog instantly enveloped the entire hell, except for Kinluo and Guyi. One of them used the power of space, and the other had a protective sword energy, all of which isolated the death fog. The next second, the goddess of death appeared behind Kinluo from the fog. To be precise, the death fog condensed the figure of the goddess of death. The goddess of death flashed with cold light on her fingertips and went straight to the back of Kinluo's head. Faced with such an attack, Kinluo reacted very quickly and directly used Sukin's back sword. Duang! The fingertips of the goddess of death touched the tip of the ancient short sword, and the two collided and made a sound like the sound of metal clashing. The goddess of death retreated immediately after failing to strike, because the blood meteorite of the devil has already landed on this side of the ground. Standing outside the range of the blood meteorite of the devil, the goddess of death suddenly felt a soreness and tingling in her fingertips, and at the same time felt a tingling sensation. Looking down, she just found that there was a wound on her fingertips. The extremely rich death power slowly flowed out from it. The goddess of death was a little surprised that Kinluo's weapon was so hard. Not only did it not break through her finger, but it scratched her finger. As far as she knew, There was no metal in this world that could do this. Even the famous Ru metal in the 9 realms, she could easily break it with one finger, not to mention hurting her. The goddess of death forgot how many years she had not been hurt. For a moment, she couldn't help but get angry. The surrounding death fog seemed to feel the anger of the goddess of death. It began to boil. Even Kinluo felt that the protective sword energy around him could not resist the erosion of the death fog. It began to slowly disintegrate. Chapter 319 Death Plunder. Kinluo's mind moved. The power of the 4 ghost swords surrounded him. The power of blood, the power of fluctuations, the power of ghost energy, and the power of sword energy. These 4 forces surrounded Kinluo's body. They directly dissipated the death fog within 1,000 meters around Kinluo. It was impossible to get close to Kinluo. However, the anger in the heart of the goddess of death slowly dissipated. Of course, she did not forgive Kinluo for hurting her, but the anger in her heart turned into another emotion, greed. At this time, the goddess of death looked at the ancient short sword in Kinluo's hand, and her eyes flashed with greed. Such a magic weapon can easily hurt her, and naturally it can also hurt other gods. You must know that her weapon can also pose a threat to other gods, but it would never be like this, easily breaking through its defense. And the rare goddess of death had such a special emotion in her heart. Human, I like you even more. Don't worry, you will never escape from my palm. You are destined to be mine. The goddess of death licked her red lips, and her eyes seemed to want to eat Kinluo directly. Kinluo couldn't help but feel a little helpless when she heard this. Why did the sky stare at her to death? If the person being stared at by the goddess of death was the purple potato spirit Thanos and the followers of the goddess of death, I'm afraid that snot bubbles would come out of her nose with joy. But now Kinluo just felt a tingling scalp. Being stared at by a god, or the god in charge of death, is not a good thing. This time the trouble must be solved, otherwise, it will be endless in the future. Fuck you. Don't even think about it. No way. I would rather die than surrender. Kinluo cursed in a low voice, controlled the demon blood meteorite to change direction, and smashed towards the goddess of death. But the goddess of death reacted very quickly. He dodged the attack of the demon blood meteorite again. Then the big blood ball of the demon blood meteorite merged into the ground, and turned into a majestic blood force that spread out. Almost half of the land of hell was covered in it. It formed a sharp contrast with the death fog in the air. At this moment, it seemed as if heaven and hell were turned around. Rather die than surrender? You don't have to surrender. It doesn't matter, as long as you die. The eyes of the goddess of death lit up slightly, and she looked at Kinluo with a teachable look. Kinluo couldn't help but twitch at the corner of his mouth when he heard it. Chapter 168. The monk robe of Guyi moved without wind, and the cosmic energy at the center of his brows flashed with dazzling light. His hands formed seals continuously, and the mysterious power spread out. In an instant, the whole world began to undergo wonderful changes. Kinluo felt at this moment that the kingdom of death, which was very close to him just now, suddenly moved away. Not bad spatial power, but it is still too far away to isolate my kingdom of death. The eyes of the goddess of death flashed with cold light. The breath of death around him spread out instantly, and the whole world began to be filled with a layer of death fog. Guyi groaned, and a trace of scarlet blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth, and the colored mark at the center of his brows also became dim, obviously affected by the power of death. It was directly covered with a layer of haze. Guyi bit it tightly, and the secret magic power in his body continued to condense into spatial power to block the arrival of the kingdom of death. But if it goes on like this, Guyi can't hold on for long. Other things are easy to say. The main reason is that the death power is too overbearing. It is difficult to resist the cosmic energy of the same level head-on. HMPH. However, at this moment, Kinluo snorted coldly, and the blood in his body surged, instantly breaking through the blockade of the death power around him. Then Kinluo raised his hand, and a fist-sized blood ball slowly rose from his palm. The blood ball contains a considerable amount of blood power, and the life force contained in it seems so incompatible with this dead gray fog. It is completely two extreme powers. This move is exactly the move that Kazan used on Kinluo, and it is also one of the most powerful skills in the Berserker series. Demonic Blood Meteorite. feeling the majestic vitality in Kinmo's body. The face of the goddess of death showed a trace of excitement. What a vigorous power! If you can harvest such a life, it is simply supreme happiness. After the voice fell, the goddess of death waved directly at Kinmo. In an instant, countless death powers that turned into gray fog surrounded Kinmo, want to devour all the blood power he condensed. However, seeing this, Kinmo raised his hand and the blood ball immediately soared into the air, and the gray-white mist also rushed into the air with the blood ball. Buzz! After the blood ball stopped floating in the air, it immediately made a buzzing sound. The blood-colored wave power spread out, forming waves of blood-colored ripples in the entire sky. The gray mist that was attracted was instantly dissipated by the impact of the blood energy. It felt like the spring sun melting snow. At the same time, all the existences in hell felt that their life force was forcibly absorbed. Even the blush at the corner of Guyi's mouth did not escape the blood absorption, and turned into a blood-red light spot and rose into the air. If the only one who was not affected was, I'm afraid it was the goddess of death. After all, her whole body was full of death power, let alone vitality, and she didn't even have a bit of blood. Fortunately, there are still many demons left in hell. With their blood power, it is enough to make the demon blood fall stronger. It's just that these demons are suffering. Old Carter and Johnny wreaked havoc. The 8 ghosts and gods did another wave. Now it's Kinmo's turn again, and he really doesn't want to leave the demons alive. Those demons want to escape desperately to stop the loss of their own life force. Unfortunately, this time the range of the demon blood meteorite is the entire hell. Unless they can escape from hell, they are destined to become nutrients for the demon blood meteorite. The goddess of death looked at the demon blood meteorite in the sky with a little curiosity. It's been less than half a minute, and the blood ball has expanded more than 100 times. The blood energy emitted from it is also more and more majestic. The death-gray fog that was originally close has dissipated more than half under the uninterrupted impact of the blood energy, and it can no longer get close. When the goddess of death waved her hand, the death-gray fog rolled up, and countless mists began to condense, gradually forming the shape of a giant. The death giant stretched out his hands to grab the demon blood meteorite, but every time he approached, he was still shaken away by the spreading blood energy fluctuations, so that he could never catch the demon blood meteorite. However, as the power of the goddess of death was infused into the body of the death giant as if it was free, the giant's figure not only became more solid, but also several times larger. The huge palm actually began to bear the blood fluctuations of the demon blood meteorite and put his hand on it. Boom! The moment the two came into contact, the whole hell trembled, and countless space cracks spread out. Guyi's figure shook suddenly, and his face turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. Originally, it was enough for Guyi to hold on to prevent the kingdom of death from descending into hell. Now such an energy collision has occurred in hell. With the maintenance of his own strength, Guyi really can't hold on. While Kinmo was controlling the demon blood meteorite, he naturally noticed Guyi's state. He knew very well that Guyi was desperately trying to maintain the stability of space at this time, but now all his mind is on the goddess of death, and he can't help Guyi at all. To put it bluntly, he is a little overwhelmed now. And in terms of the power of space, he really doesn't have a good grasp of it. That is, the instant movement can be more reliable. How can I help Guyi share the pressure and help her stabilize the space? Kinmo was thinking about this problem while controlling the demon blood meteorite. Suddenly, Kinmo had a flash of inspiration in his mind and remembered a trophy he had just obtained. How could he forget it? With this thing, Guyi would definitely be able to relax a lot. Chapter 318 Space Blockade. Cut finger. Kinmo flipped his hand, and a shiny blue cube appeared in his hand, exuding a wonderful power. What else could it be if not the cosmic cube? The space gem inside the cosmic cube is perfect for dealing with such space problems. Guyi, go ahead. Kinmo threw the cosmic cube in his hand directly to Guyi. Guyi was stunned for a moment, and then a look of joy appeared on his face. With this thing, a big problem has been solved. The breadth of the infinity gem? The space gem? What a troublesome thing. The goddess of death frowned. She knew very well that the infinity gem contained almost endless power. The space gem has a special effect on the cover of space power. If the space gem is mastered by that annoying wizard, the kingdom of death may never come. Thinking of this, the goddess of death made a decisive move and wanted to snatch the space gem. However, how could Kinlawo let her get her wish? As early as the moment he threw the gem, Kinlawo had already prepared for the goddess of death to snatch it. After all, as one of the 5 gods, if the goddess of death did not know the infinite gems, that would be a joke. The goddess of death flashed and appeared in front of Guyi in an instant. She stretched out her hands to take the cosmic cube away. However, at this moment, a flash of lightning burst out from the cosmic cube in front of the goddess of death. Then a phantom like a furious King Kong burst out from the cosmic cube. Although the power of the phantom is not very strong, it contains some strange deterrent power. Even as strong as the goddess of death, she couldn't help but be shocked back by this power. Just this one step away is enough for Guyi to get the cosmic magic. I saw a small spark portal appear near the cosmic cube. The next second, a clean hand stretched out from it and firmly grasped the cosmic cube in its hand. Then the spark portal disappeared, and the cosmic cube appeared in Ancient One's hand. The moment the cosmic cube was in his hand, a blue light burst out from Ancient One's body. Then Ancient One's figure disappeared from the spot and appeared at the edge of hell. The blue space force immediately spread out. It directly covered the entire hell. The space cracks above the sky began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 169. It looks extremely weird. Chapter 316. Generous conditions. Rejected again. Although this death force is very weird, but Ancient One is not a pushover. She just arranged countless magic circles around. Once a magic circle is eroded, there will be a magic circle to make up for it immediately. In just a few seconds, 30 or 40 magic circles were consumed, but at least the death force was kept out. Servant of the Devourer. There are some things that you cannot interfere with, and the decision of the gods is not something you can stop. Get out of hell now, otherwise, don't blame me for not giving Devourer face. The goddess of death looked at Ancient One with a grim look. Obviously, the behavior of Ancient One just now made the goddess of death a little angry. Now it is only because of the Devourer that she did not attack. If it were someone else, they would probably have reported to the kingdom of death by now. Goddess of death, I am the supreme mage of earth, not the servant of Devourer of planets. It was just an accident that I got his cosmic energy. Kinlawo is my friend, and I will definitely intervene in this matter, Ancient One said decisively, and directly stated his position. He also explained the reason for the cosmic energy. She didn't want to be called the servant of God all the time. She never had any interest in being a running dog, even if the other party was a god. More importantly, Ancient One didn't want to cause trouble for Devourer of planets because of herself. Haha, very good. The supreme mage of mankind, right? Since you are not a Devourer of planets, then die. The goddess of death laughed in anger, and directly slapped Ancient One in the air. The terrifying power of death condensed into shape. It turned into a huge gray-white palm that fell from the sky. It was a bit like an alternative version of the Tathagat palm. Seeing this, Ancient One did not dare to be careless. The secret energy and cosmic energy around him were intertwined. In an instant, hundreds of magic arrays appeared on the ground and condensed into shape. These magic circles, like moths to a flame, flew towards the giant palm that fell from the sky. However, this time the power of death was not as easy to resist as before. The giant palm of death broke hundreds of magic circles in a row, and its speed remained unchanged. Seeing this, Guyi immediately formed seals with both hands. The magic circles around him that had not yet approached suddenly changed dramatically. Hundreds of magic circles turned upside down, like spinning coins. At the same time, they spread out, and beams of light emerged from the magic circles. They connected to each other and formed a huge magic circle. Boom! With a loud bang, the moment the huge magic circle was formed, a colorful beam of light shot up into the sky. It hit the giant palm of death directly. This finally stopped the falling giant palm of death. Seeing this, the cold light in the eyes of the goddess of death became stronger. The aura around her completely burst out at this moment, and the aura of death instantly filled the entire hell. Her face, which was originally full of wrinkles, faintly showed a touch of bone-like color. As the palm of the goddess of death turned over, the death breath on the giant palm of death suddenly increased several times, and the colorful light column that supported it was also affected by it, and black cracks began to appear. Guyi gritted his teeth, just when she wanted to change the magic circle again to resist the giant palm of death. Suddenly, she felt a pat on her shoulder. Then Kinluo's tall figure stood in front of her and said, "Master Guyi, when the fight starts, you can assist me. There is no need to fight so hard. If you really die, who will I find as the housekeeper of my apartment in the future?" Hearing this, Guyi, whose face was full of determination, eased a little. She said seriously, "Let me do it. The goddess of death has the power to harvest lives. I have the energy mark of the planet devourer. Her power may not be good for me. Come on. It sounds like I am afraid of her. Play a good assist and watch me see." Kinluo's voice fell. The aura around him increased again. At this time, the momentum of the four ghost swords intertwined, and the domineering aura of the overlord was also integrated into it, coupled with the unique power of the Shushan sword immortal. For a moment, Kinluo's figure seemed to be raised countless times. Suspended in the air, he was really like a god. Compared with the goddess of death who exuded the breath of death, he was no less than that, even more than that. Feeling the momentum of Kinluo's full burst, the goddess of death couldn't help but tremble, and her eyes were full of brilliance when she looked at Kinluo. At the same time, she was more determined to bring Kinluo into the kingdom of death. It's a pity to put such a human on the earth. In time, maybe he will become the sixth god, on an equal footing with them, and with the help of one more god, she might be able to defeat the other 5 gods and become a true overlord. Human, I'll give you another chance. Submit to me and join the kingdom of death. I can guarantee that you will be in existence above countless undead souls under one god in the kingdom of death. And I will not restrict your freedom. You can live wherever you want. The goddess of death looked at Kinluo and said very seriously, "The goddess of death's desire for Kinluo has reached a new height at this time. Even in countless years, she has never been so eager for an existence. Such generous conditions." Even Guyi couldn't help but be moved at this time. Of course, it was just a heartbeat. After all, this matter did not fall on him. I just don't know how the dead Mephisto would feel when he heard such a generous request. I guess he would be angry to death on the spot if he didn't die. He joined the kingdom of death. But why is the difference in treatment so big? I refuse, Kinluo said as the sword energy condensed on the long sword. The next second, Kinluo slashed with a sword. Suddenly, the dazzling sword light spread out. TVB Novel Network. It is one of Kinluo's favorite sword moves, breaking through the air and slashing with a sword. The sword light of the sword that broke through the sky slashed directly towards the giant palm of death in the sky. The sharp sword energy almost instantly penetrated the giant palm of death. The power of death dissipated in the sky. The sword light of the sword that broke through the sky was not spared from the invasion of the power of death and dissipated completely. Kinluo couldn't help but shudder when he saw this. This power of death is stronger than he thought. I didn't expect that even the sword energy could erode it. It seems that he really has to be careful this time. The goddess of death was rejected again, but she didn't get angry. She just shook her head in disappointment. Forget it. I'll take you to the kingdom of death. You will agree there. Kinluo couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he heard it. This guy really has his eyes on him. But now that things have come to this, just do it. Kinluo looked at the goddess of death with sharp eyes, and the 4 elements of energy surged in his body. Chapter 317 Forced Fusion. Demon Blood Meteorite. Just when Kinluo wanted to make a move, the surrounding space suddenly began to tremble. Kinluo seemed to see the kingdom of death that had just flashed before his eyes. Damn it, death is forcibly dragging Kinluo into the kingdom of death. Does she really not care about this world? Guyi's face suddenly changed when he saw this. Now death's behavior is tantamount to merging the 2 worlds, directly turning hell into a part of the world of death. Although it is unknown how much charm Kinluo has that the goddess of death is willing to give up hell to get her, but Guyi knew that she had to stop it. Otherwise, the 2 worlds would be forcibly merged, and hell would inevitably collapse. You know, this is the collapse of one world. Even if hell can't catch up with the human world, the energy generated by its collapse is enough to destroy her and Kinluo. even if you can survive by chance. The best result is to enter the kingdom of death. In that case, what is the difference between it and death? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170. The gray and white sky full of deathly silence also changed a little at this moment. The gray and white sky trembled slightly. Then the sky cracked something like a door. The next second, a woman in black gauze walked out of the door and fell down. From the angle of Guyi and Kinluo, it can be seen through the black gauze that the goddess of death seems to be nothing. Through the black gauze, it can be seen that there seems to be a gray and white world behind the door. Some figures and buildings can be seen faintly, but there is no color in the whole world. The kingdom of death? It seems that the goddess of death is really angry this time, Guyi murmured, and his expression became more and more solemn. Speaking of which, it was the first time that Kinluo saw Guyi showing such a look. Even when facing the devourer of planets, Guyi did not look like this. After Kinluo glanced at Guyi beside him, he put all his mind on the goddess of death. It must be said that the goddess of death is more beautiful and moving than he imagined. It is definitely not the skeleton or mosaic in the comics. The goddess of death in this world is no different from Maypark after the addition of the slippery fruit. She is absolutely fair-skinned, beautiful, and has long legs. No wonder Thanos, the purple potato spirit, is so obsessed with her. Kinluo was looking at the goddess of death. The other party was also looking at Kinluo, feeling Kinluo's identity and the breath he exuded. A hint of surprise flashed in the eyes of the goddess of death. Chapter 315. Entering death and sending to hell. The goddess of death has witnessed countless years. She has seen strong people of countless races, but it is the first time she has seen a human who has such a power close to that of a god, and even contains a power that is not weaker than that of a god. Even those humans with demigod bodies can never have such a powerful power, not to mention an ordinary human. After the goddess of death landed, she stood not far from Kinluo. The atmosphere became silent and awkward for a while. Hello, goddess of death. Your dress is so white. Oh no, so big. Not bad. Kinluo was also a little scared by the gaze of the goddess of death, so he waved his hand decisively and greeted the goddess of death with a smile. This solved the current awkward situation. As soon as Kinluo said this, Guyi and the goddess of death were both stunned. They never expected that the meeting between the two sides would start like this. Guyi's eyes twitched, and she couldn't help but cover her heart with her hands. In countless years, Kinluo is probably the first person who dares to say such words to the goddess of death. It's really too exciting. Guyi suddenly felt that his heart was so fragile. The goddess of death looked down, as if she realized something, and her face became a little unnatural. The green fingers lightly tapped the air. Suddenly, her graceful body was shrouded in a layer of gray-white death aura. It was covered tightly. Kinluo couldn't help but grit his teeth secretly when he saw this, and he regretted it in his heart. Sure enough, the ancients were honest. The saying too much talk leads to mistakes is so true. Look, isn't this a chance to feast your eyes? Human, you are really interesting. You are the most interesting human I have ever seen. Are you interested in joining my kingdom of death? The goddess of death looked at Kinluo, as if a little girl saw a new toy, and spoke with a bit of desire in her tone. The voice was very crisp and moving. Just one sentence was enough to make ordinary people fascinated. Of course, this does not include Kinluo and Guyi. It's just that they couldn't help but be dumbfounded after hearing the words of the goddess of death. Logically speaking, the goddess of death is one of the 5 gods. They killed someone's younger brother, the spokesperson of hell. Instead of asking for punishment, they invited Kinluo to join the kingdom of death. When did the gods become so good-tempered? Besides, as a goddess, shouldn't death be that kind of aloof? Otherwise, it's also the ethereal feeling of Zilong Nu who doesn't eat fireworks in the world. Why do I feel that the style of this goddess of death is a little wrong? Ahem. To avoid going off topic, Ancient One coughed and said, Goddess of death, regarding Mephisto. However, before she could finish her words, She was interrupted by the goddess of death. The goddess of death glanced at Ancient One and said, "Servant of the devouring star, I don't want to hear your voice again. It's just Mephisto. I don't care who the Lord of Hell is." Then the goddess of death looked at Kinlo again and said, "Human. If you are willing to join the kingdom of death, I can give you hell." This time, the voice of the goddess of death changed a little. The crisp and pleasant feeling before faded a little, but it was a little more breathtaking. The existence with weaker spiritual power may have agreed to the request of the goddess of death. Fortunately, Kinlo was protected by his heart and eyes, and the defense line of the soul was not so easy to break through. Even if it was the goddess of death, it would be absolutely wishful thinking to break through Kinlo's soul defense line with just one or two words. Kinlo decisively shook his head and refused the invitation of the goddess of death. "Sorry, goddess of death, I don't want to join your kingdom yet." "Just kidding. The name of the kingdom of death doesn't sound like a good place." And a glimpse of the whole picture, just a glimpse. Kinlo has no interest in that world without any color. As for entering the kingdom of death to send hell, Kinlo also didn't take it to heart. "Just kidding, hell is not a particularly important existence. Anyway, the soul hunting is almost done now. Big deal. Come here from time to time to get some autumn wind." Guyi didn't expect Kinlo to be so favored by the goddess of death, even at the cost of sending hell out. But when she heard Kinlo's decisive refusal, she didn't feel any surprise in her heart. Based on her understanding of Kinlo, if Kinlo didn't refuse, it would be a ghost. The goddess of death frowned slightly, and a faint dead power emanated from her body. Kinlo immediately became alert when he saw this, and the hand holding the long sword couldn't help but tighten a little. "Why do you reject me? Everyone will die, and the final destination is my world. You just came here to accompany me in advance. What's wrong with that?" The goddess of death looked at Kinlo with some resentment. It felt like a pure girl looking at the scumbag who abandoned her. To be honest, if he was not sure that today was the first time to meet the goddess of death, Kinlo would have suspected that he had an affair with her. Rejected is rejected. "Why do you look like this?" "Ahem." Kinlo coughed lightly and said righteously, "There is a saying in our country that life is precious, but love is more precious. If it is for freedom, both can be abandoned. So I'm sorry, I still yearn for freedom. Anyway, you also said that I will go to the kingdom of death after I die, so don't care about this little time." Although he said so, Kinlo was thinking about how to gain eternal life in his heart. "Are you kidding?" Kinlo would not go to that broken place even if he died. He would rather become a ghost like Jiger. "You're right, but I'm not that guy called Eternal. I don't like waiting." The goddess of death nodded thoughtfully, then shook her head and said, "Forget it. I won't waste my time talking to you. Just follow me." After that, the goddess of death stretched out her hand and clenched it in the air. Suddenly, the breath of death spread. Kinlo immediately felt an invisible force coming towards him. Before he could draw his sword to defeat the enemy, Guyi took the lead. Guyi's body was shining. The next moment, several colorful magic circles protected her and Kinlo in the middle. At this moment, the power fell on the magic circle. In an instant, those magic circles began to dim, as if they were eroded by something. Chapter 171. In an instant, the three people's expressions were different. The captain and Natasha were both gloomy, their fists clenched, and they were extremely disappointed with Nick Fury. He'll clasped his hands together, looking like he was praying, with hope in his eyes. Soon, Maypark and Tony rushed to an altitude of 10,000 meters. Although there is still oxygen at an altitude of 10,000 meters, the density is too low, and the air pressure is too low. Spider-Man and Maypark both showed some discomfort on their faces. Fortunately, the physical fitness of the two was there, and although they felt a little uncomfortable, it was not unacceptable. "It's almost done. I'm going to let go." Tony's voice came from above, almost shouting. Upon hearing this, Maypark immediately formed a sword finger with his hand, and the sword seal on his palm began to emit a faint white light. A sharp breath instantly spread. At this time, Tony's nano-battle suit covering the big mushroom began to change and condense, and soon formed a small thruster. 1, 2, 3, go! Tony roared, and he let go of his arms, and then flew downwards without looking back. With the help of the thrusters, The mushroom egg flew up again, but I don't know if it was time or if it was affected by something. Beep, beep, a shrill alarm suddenly sounded on the big mushroom, and it was obviously about to explode. Heavenly Sword, command, May Parker shouted, pointing his sword at the void, pointing directly at the big mushroom. A buzzing sound sounded between heaven and earth, and an extremely sharp breath shot out from May Parker's sight, and a giant sword with a length of 1 kilometer was formed in the air. It directly bombarded the big mushroom. Boom! The heavenly sword hit the big mushroom, and a violent explosion occurred instantly. The violent energy and fire spread out. However, when it touched the edge of the heavenly sword, it stopped. It was directly restricted within the range of the heavenly sword. At this moment, it seemed that there was only the sword between heaven and earth. It emitted a dazzling white light. Chapter 314. The dust has settled, and the power of the goddess of death's sky sword has directly blocked all the space above the sky. The explosive power and pollution power of the big mushroom are all covered in it, and cannot spread out at all. However, the impact force generated by the collision between the two is still quite terrifying, especially at this altitude of 10,000 meters. There is no place to hide at all. Fortunately, there is the body of Venom, a giant beast, facing the terrifying impact force. Venom's body is like a ball of gel. No matter how fierce the impact is, Venom is just drifting with the flow, and soon most of the impact is removed. In addition, Tony opened the protective shield in time. Under the 2 layers of protection, almost no one was injured. The only thing that can be called a loss is that Tony's battlesuit is missing a small piece, but it is now slowly being repaired. The light of the sky sword gradually became dazzling at this moment, and at the same time, the fire inside the sky sword began to dissipate strangely, as if something was absorbing it. A buzzing sound came again between heaven and earth. Then the sky sword turned into white light and disappeared into the sky. The great mushroom crisis was completely settled. It's finally over, those damn guys. This matter will never end like this. Tony breathed a sigh of relief and sat on Venom's back very unceremoniously. With the mask off, his expression was a little complicated, with both relief and anger. Of course this matter will not end like this, but everything still needs to wait for Keen to come back. May Parker kneaded her shoulders and spoke slowly. Just now, she performed the sword seal, even if she didn't use any power, but she still endured a certain amount of impact. Now her arms are very sore. Mr. Carter and Mr. Johnny have returned to the apartment and are currently in a coma, but Brother Kin has not returned yet. Spider-Man handed the phone to Tony and May Parker, which was a message from the little green goblin Harry. Shouldn't they come back together? Nothing will happen to Kin, right? May Parker took the phone and saw the content on it, and his expression became a little nervous. Don't worry, with Kinlawo here, you should worry about others. Maybe there are some problems in hell that need to be dealt with. After all, it is another world. Kinlawo has destroyed the master of that world, so we can't just leave it alone, right? Tony said with a relaxed look, waving his hand. Hearing this, Spider-Man and May Parker both nodded, and their worries dissipated a lot, but they didn't notice that a trace of haze flashed in the depths of Tony's eyes at this time. Based on his understanding of Kinlawo, Tony can basically conclude that Kinlawo has encountered a powerful opponent. He sent Johnny and his son back because he couldn't take care of them. The character that Kinlawo can go all out like this is definitely not a fuel-saving lamp. Tony looked at the armor that he was constantly repairing, and he couldn't help feeling powerless in his heart. The gap was getting bigger and bigger. Originally, he could still see Kinlawo's back, but now he doesn't even have the ability to witness his battle. The desire to become stronger became stronger in Tony's heart. In hell, after Kinlawo sealed Brashu, immediately regained consciousness. As a result, I saw Ancient One who was facing a great enemy, and the sky turned gray. It was said before that the sky of hell is dim and red, like the sunset in the desert, but now, the whole sky has turned gray. The whole hell is also filled with the smell of death. People can't help but feel a sense of despair. It seems that she is coming. It's fast enough. I thought I had to wait for a while. Kinlawo looked at Ancient One beside him and said, "Be prepared. I hope you and I can leave hell alive today." Ancient One nodded slightly, and said solemnly, "Hey, Master Ancient One, Didn't you say it so easily at that time, saying that you could help me block death? Why do you have to be prepared to risk your life now? Kinluo looked at Ancient One beside him with a hint of sarcasm and asked, I was ready to buy time with my life at that time, Ancient One said lightly, but his eyes never left the gray sky. However, Ancient One's hands were not idle. Various seals and magic circles rose from under Ancient One's feet, but soon merged into the ground. In just a short while, hundreds of large and small magic circles merged into the ground. It was also thanks to Ancient One that he obtained the mark of cosmic energy. Otherwise, after just experiencing the battle with Brash, how could he have the power to cast so many magic circles again? Kinluo was speechless when he got Ancient One's reply. What else could he say? In terms of playing with life, Ancient One is really unambiguous. Kinluo didn't say anything more. He just turned on all the buffs, and at the same time, the ancient short sword in his hand turned into a long sword. In this situation, I don't know which system of power is more effective for the goddess of death. I might as well try the depth of the long sword first. As all of Kinluo's buffs broke out, the whole hell trembled. Chapter 172. Gulp Hill couldn't help swallowing his saliva as he looked at Ganada, who was swinging his legs and eating an ice cream cone. And then he said, well, Mr. Stark, I don't think we are joking now. Who is joking with you? Just watch it yourself. I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Tony rolled his eyes and directly projected everything that had just happened. Seeing Ganada's various operations, Hill and the other two looked at each other and were instantly numb. If it weren't for the projection as evidence, they really couldn't believe that such a thing would happen. At the same time, all the Hydra members who came to their senses inside Hydra couldn't sit still. Bald Sidwell, who is currently the head of SHIELD, said in a deep voice, check. Find that woman for me at all costs. She must be used by us. Otherwise, at this point, Sidwell didn't say anything, but everyone understands that if such an existence cannot be used by them, then it can only be destroyed. Otherwise, sooner or later, it will become an obstacle to their Hydra. Burp. After swallowing the last bite of the mushroom in the cone, Ganada burped with white smoke, patted his slightly swollen belly with satisfaction and said, it's been a long time since I felt full, comfortable. Ganada, are you okay? Do you feel any discomfort in your body? Maypark looked at Ganada with a little hesitation and concern and asked, nothing, I'm just a little sleepy after eating. Ganada yawned and showed a sleepy look on his face. Ganada took 2 steps forward. Seeing this, everyone stepped back, with embarrassment and vigilance on their faces. Now they have not completely digested the fact that Ganada swallowed the big mushroom. So in their opinion, Ganada is no different from the human-shaped mushroom. Seeing this, Ganada smiled slightly and was not annoyed. She waved her hand and said, I'm full and I'm sleepy. Whatever happens next is up to you. I'm going to sleep for a while. As the voice fell, a purple light flashed around Ganada. Then he disappeared from the spot. Seeing Ganada disappear, everyone was relieved. It's finally over. Today's day was really exciting, Venom said with emotion. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. But at this moment, Hill's phone rang. Hill's face suddenly changed after seeing the caller ID. He quickly answered the phone. Nick Fury's tired voice came out. Hill, I'm sorry, I failed and I'm running for my life. Another big mushroom has been launched and is now flying towards Kinluo's hero apartment. What? There is another one? Director Nick, you, beep beep. Before Hill could say anything in surprise, there was only a busy tone on the other end of the phone. Such a close distance. Almost everyone heard what Hill said on the phone. In an instant, everyone's faces became extremely ugly. Never expected that just after solving a big mushroom. And then there came another one. Chapter 313. Cooperation. The power of the sword seal just solved one, and here comes another one. What on earth do those people above you want to do? Do they have to make everyone disappear into ashes? May Parker looked at Hill with cold eyes. The original matter of the big mushroom had already made her extremely angry. Now there is another one, and even a clay man would still be angry. Not to mention May Parker. Even the gentlest person can't stand such tossing. Hilton was speechless for a while. She wanted to explain something, but she couldn't say it. After all, the big mushroom was indeed a reserve of S.H.I.E.L.D., and the plane that launched it was also sent by S.H.I.E.L.D. No matter what, this matter is inseparable from S.H.I.E.L.D. Jarvis, detect where the mushroom egg came from? Tony gave an order to Jarvis with a cold face. Okay, sir. After Jarvis responded, a few seconds later, Jarvis' voice came out. Another big mushroom is coming from the southeast at a high speed. According to the estimated time, it will arrive at the hero apartment in about 9 minutes and 34 seconds. There is no time to lose. Let's set off now and stop it. According to the original plan, Norman and his son are still in the apartment. As for other things, we will talk about it later. It's not too late to settle the score later. Tony looked at May Parker and said with a serious face. Although Tony said so, but listening to his gritting teeth, anyone can see how angry Tony is at this time. Okay, Venom, go full speed. May Parker patted Venom's head and said in a deep voice. Venom also knew the seriousness of the matter at this time, so without the slightest hesitation, he twisted his body and turned directly into a black shadow and flew towards the southeast. Tony followed closely behind, without even looking at Hill and the others. He was really suppressing his anger now. If he looked at it a few more times, he was really afraid that he would burst out directly on the spot. During the flight, May Parker couldn't help but feel relieved. Fortunately, he asked Kinlawo for an extra layer of insurance. Otherwise, what should he do with the second big mushroom? Hill and the others hurriedly caught up with Tony and the others. It was just that the speed difference was too great. After only 3 or 5 seconds, they could no longer see the figures of the few people. Only the venom of the giant beast could be seen a little. Soon May Parker and the others passed through the city. They came to the mountains in the southeast corner. At this time, they saw the big mushroom that was no different from the previous one flying at high speed. When I push this damn big mushroom into the sky, don't rush to take action. I will try to push it out of the atmosphere directly. Otherwise, if there is something left in this thing, it will be a big trouble, Tony said seriously. As for the pollution ability emitted by the big mushroom, everyone was terrified, and they knew how terrible this thing was. Only that Sakura said shamelessly that this thing could be drunk directly. It's just a foolish dream. He treated everyone as fools. Don't worry, leave it to me. May Park immersed his mind in the sword seal, ready to activate it at any time. Tony let out a long breath. Then he closed his legs, combined the thrusters into one, and suddenly burst out with an amazing speed. Soon Tony rushed to the vicinity of the big mushroom and formed a situation of running side by side with it. Tony hugged the big mushroom with both hands. The nano armor seemed to come alive and began to spread towards the big mushroom. Soon the big mushroom was completely caught in Tony's hand. Following the power of the high-speed flight, all the thrusters on Tony's body were activated, and with the force of inertia, it suddenly swung upwards. In an instant, the flight trajectory of the big mushroom was changed, and it flew towards the sky at a high speed. This process seemed simple. In fact, it has all been accurately calculated by Jarvis. If there is any mistake, Tony will not only fail to change the flight direction of the big mushroom, but it is very likely to detonate it on the spot. Fortunately, everything went smoothly, and everything was within Jarvis's expectations. Venom didn't need Maypark's reminder, and immediately swayed and followed Tony. Maypark wanted to let Spider-Man go down, but before she could say anything, Spider-Man had tied himself to Venom with spider silk. They looked like they were going to live and die together. Seeing this, Maypark didn't say much, and activated his observation haki to the fullest, staring at Tony and the big mushroom who were rising, ready to attack at any time. The late Captain and Natasha happened to see the scene of several people taking off. Chapter 173. Leave it to me, don't worry, this time I'm finally going to have a full meal. Ganata patted his chest and promised, with an excited look on his face. Then his figure flashed, turned into a purple light and rushed towards the big mushroom. Maypark and Tony looked at each other, nodded in unison, and immediately followed Ganata through the communication device in the battle suit. Maypark said to Tony, "Wait, if Ganata can't solve it, Tony, you try to get the big mushroom out of orbit, and then I will take action to solve it." Kin still has a backup plan here. Tony didn't reply, but just made an okay gesture to Maypark. Then the thrusters accelerated, and in a blink of an eye, they were on par with Ganata. ready to take action at any time. It would be a lie to say that Tony was not nervous at this time, such a close distance to the big mushroom. Even though his battlesuit has undergone many upgrades and has completed some nanotechnology, but once the big mushroom explodes, his chance of survival is still zero. But things have come to this point. Even if there is a fear of death in his heart, he must bite the bullet, not for anything else, but for the safety of Pepper. Danger. He must also stop the explosion of the big mushroom. Soon everyone could see the outline of the big mushroom. It must be said that this shield's big mushroom is really different. Looking at the size, you can tell that it is obviously filled with ingredients. The power is definitely far better than the average big mushroom. As the distance to the big mushroom gets closer and closer, everyone's expressions become nervous. Only Ganada's face is full of excitement. I saw Ganada put his hands together, and a faint purple light emanated from his body. It looks like a gorgeous human-shaped amethyst. Very dazzling. At this time, the Hydra members in S.H.I.E.L.D. saw this scene through the satellite. The expressions were a bit sarcastic. These extraordinary people under Kinluo, don't they want to use their bodies as big mushrooms? It's ridiculous. What a pity. If they can join Hydra, they will definitely be a group of impressive forces. Humphrey, such a fool. Blame it on him for following the wrong person. Where is Kinluo? Such a big thing happened. Hasn't he come forward yet? I don't know. He just made a move during the alien invasion, and then disappeared without a trace. Never mind him. After this incident, our Hydra's goal will move forward another step. That's right. Long live Hydra! Exclamation mark. Long live Hydra! Exclamation mark times and semicolon dot 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 dot. In the eyes of countless people, Ganada turned into a purple light and rushed directly to the end of the big mushroom. Her crystal-like fingers directly poked the head of the big mushroom. Seeing this scene, Tony and May Park's hearts instantly rose to their throats. This girl is really daring, poking the big mushroom with her hand. This doesn't even give a chance to remedy the situation. May Park immediately mobilized her mind and integrated it into the sword seal in her palm. She must ensure that at the moment of the explosion, she will directly destroy it with the sword seal, minimize the damage as much as possible. As for Ganada's safety, May Park could only say sorry. https://w.tvts.net/ and the people of Hydra were all looking at this moment. The mocking look on their faces became even stronger. It seemed as if they had seen the explosion of the big mushroom. However, a scene that no one expected happened. Ganada's finger easily pierced the big mushroom, and the whole arm was immersed in it. But the imagined explosion did not happen. At this moment, the space seemed to solidify, or to be more precise, it slowed down countless times. The big mushroom slowly shattered at a speed clearly visible to the naked eye, and some firelight reflected on Ganada's face. It made his already gorgeous face even more radiant. For a moment, everyone was stunned, looking at the scene in front of them in disbelief. Gulp. Tony swallowed hard. There is such a thing? It's really fucking unscientific. Chapter 312 Mushroom Brand Ice Cream. There is another one? Ganada narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he was feeling something. About 10 seconds later, Ganada opened his eyes and pouted his mouth. There was an unnatural expression on his face. I thought this thing would be delicious. The taste is just so-so, but it still has a lot of energy. Forget it. As long as it can fill your stomach, don't care too much about the taste, Ganada muttered. Obviously the taste of the big mushroom did not meet her expectations. May Park and Spider-Man have very sharp eyes and ears, and Tony also has Jarvis to help, so they heard all of Ganada's muttering. The three people who were shocked in an instant were shocked again. This big mushroom has a taste. Inexplicably, May Park suddenly remembered the scene when Kinluo devoured those sinful souls. She felt that the two of them were quite compatible in some ways. The appetite is really good. Neither of them is picky about food. After Ganada finished complaining about the taste of the big mushroom, she put her other hand on the big mushroom. To be precise, it should not be called a big mushroom, but a ball of fire. Now the outer coat of the big mushroom has been swallowed by the flames. It looks like a little sun, held in Ganada's arms. When the Hydra people saw this scene, they were completely doubting their lives. Their eyes were wide open, staring at Ganada, who was holding the big mushroom, for fear of missing any details. Just when Tony and the others thought that Ganata would swallow the whole big mushroom into his stomach like sucking jelly, Ganata's two hands suddenly, she moved. Her hands were emitting purple light, and she was rubbing the mushroom quickly. The speed was so fast that it seemed as if countless hands were rubbing the mushroom back and forth. Compared with the mushroom that was slowed down countless times, the scene was simply as spectacular as it could be. As weird as it could be, as Ganata's hands continued to rub, the nearly 1 meter long mushroom fireball began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. It soon became the size of a tennis ball, but the energy contained in it did not decrease at all. https://w.v'_s.het/ On the contrary, due to the reduction in size, the power inside became more condensed. Even though they were more than 10 meters apart, Spider-Man and Maypark could feel a sense of fear. Then, a scene that shocked everyone again happened. A purple light flashed in Ganata's hand, and an ice cream cone appeared in his hand. Ganata carefully placed the tennis-sized mushroom on the cone, which really looked like a single scoop of ice cream. The Big Mushroom brand ice cream was born! This is definitely the most 10B ice cream I have ever seen. Spider-Man covered his forehead and said this slowly. Tony and Maypark nodded involuntarily after hearing this. After the ice cream was made, Ganata couldn't wait to eat it. With one bite, she bit off 1/3 of the ice cream ball. The orange-red light instantly illuminated Ganata's cheeks, and as she swallowed, it slowly merged into her stomach. Only after entering the stomach did the orange-red light disappear without a trace. However, at this moment, a whistling sound suddenly came from behind Maypark and others. Looking back, I saw the captain and 3 others, stepping on the Chitauri's flying vehicle and driving quickly. Miss Maypark, where is the Big Mushroom? Is it solved? Still not here? Hill's nervous and uneasy voice came over. There, Ganata is eating. Tony pointed to the half of the mushroom ice cream left in Ganata's hand and said, Chapter 174. If these souls are absorbed, it is very likely that they will break through directly. When death comes, he is still breaking through. If he leaves Guyi behind, then he will be the second pure Wu. Solve the problem first and then break through quietly. Kinlawo sank his mind into the area where Brashu was alone in the ghost hand. It was still the same here, shrouded in a dark swamp, exuding a desperate and terrifying atmosphere, and Brashu's big head was not outside. The whole swamp seemed to be boiling at this time, and ripples continued to spread on the swamp. Kinlawo's mind moved. Suddenly, the swamp was no longer an obstacle to sight. Kinlawo clearly saw that Brashu was madly hitting a huge iron sword deep in the swamp. The giant sword was full of rich blood power. No matter how Brashu hit the iron lock, it was immovable. It was impossible to break through the blood blockade. Instead, Brashu hit his head and bled, looking miserable. Brashu, are you busy? Or are you using a self-torture trick on me? Kinlawo's slightly sarcastic voice sounded. Braxa stopped the collision immediately. He raised his huge head, stared at Kinlawo angrily and shouted, Human, don't be so proud. If it weren't for Kazan, you would have been my nourishment now. Damn bastard. All of you guys with Kazan's breath deserve to die. Braxa became more and more angry, and the last sentence was almost roared out. In an instant, the whole swamp split apart, and Braxu no longer struggled with the giant sword. He rushed towards Kinlawo frantically, facing Brax's charge. Kinlawo shook his head. This guy was really angry and lost his mind. Kinlawo didn't even take the initiative. The blood on the giant sword instantly resonated with the blood in Kinlawo's body. Then countless chains came out of the giant sword and easily suppressed Braxu. It couldn't move at all. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Braxa struggled frantically, and the roar resounded throughout the swamp. It was a pity that he was like a small fish being held down by someone, and no matter how hard he struggled, he could not move at all. Ha ha, Brashu, you. Humph, I'll deal with you after the matter is over. Kinlawo sneered and was about to taunt him, but suddenly he felt a palpitating force. That was the breath of death. He knew that the real master had come, so he simply didn't say any more nonsense. With a wave of his hand, countless iron chains flew out of the giant sword again, tied Brashu tightly, and then left the dark swamp. Damn, It's coming so fast. Tony cursed with a bad look on his face, and immediately told the arrival of the big mushroom. The faces of the others also turned ugly. Only Ganada's big eyes became bright. She had been waiting for this feast for too long. I think we'd better come up with a better way. If someone can push the big mushroom away from the root, it's best to push it towards no man's land, or 10,000 meters above the sky, and then use a powerful force to completely destroy it. Hill glanced at Ganada at this time and spoke quickly. As soon as she said this, the captain and Natasha nodded. Compared to asking a girl to eat the big mushroom, Hill's method is undoubtedly more reliable. Johnny and Spider-Man also agreed with this plan. In an instant, almost everyone looked at May Parker. Kinlawo was not there, and May Parker was his representative. It can be said that the final decision is still in the hands of May Parker. I believe Kin. He will never do it without a purpose. Let's set off now while the big mushroom is not close to the city. May Parker clenched the sword seal in his palm, then stood up decisively and said, "But, Miss May Parker, if you have the ability, you can carry out your plan. I won't stop you." Hill wanted to try harder after hearing May Parker's decision, but he was interrupted by May Parker directly, and he was speechless. In fact, May Parker's words meant very clearly, if you can do it, you can do it. If you can't, don't talk too much. Hill couldn't help but look at the captain and Natasha. Seeing this, the captain and Natasha showed a bit of helplessness on their faces. They were not capable of dealing with the giant mushroom, or they would have taken action long ago. "Let's go now." As Ganada spoke, a purple light flashed around her body, and her outfit instantly changed into the same armor as Galactus. She was suspended in the air, emitting a strong aura. For a moment, Spider-Man and Venom couldn't help but shudder. They looked at each other and saw disbelief in each other. It was really unexpected that such a cute girl would have such a terrifying power. The others more or less felt the power and oppression emanating from Ganada. For a moment, they couldn't help but believe that Ganada could devour the giant mushroom. "Follow me." Tony put on his armor and started the thrusters, breaking through the window. Ganada immediately followed, and his speed was only faster than Tony's. "Venom, I'm sorry to bother you, but I can't fly fast enough." May Parker didn't hesitate at this time, and looked directly at Venom and said. Spider-Man also nodded in agreement. "Okay." Venom agreed straightforwardly, jumped out of the window, and instantly turned into the appearance of the Leviathan warship. Chapter 311, Face to Face. Ganada takes action. May Parker and Spider-Man stood on the back of Venom, who had turned into the Leviathan. They rushed towards Tony and Ganada at a very fast speed. Hill and others looked at the backs of May Parker and others. Their expressions were helpless. They were really at a loss now because they had no ability to fly. As for airplanes and the like, they could no longer get help from S.H.I.E.L.D. Where should they find airplanes? "Captain, what should we do now?" Hill asked, looking at the captain. The captain was also helpless when he heard this, and he also wanted to know what to do. "Those Chitauri aircraft have not been dealt with yet." Natasha's words were like a wake-up call, and Hill and the captain's eyes suddenly lit up. They ran out of the building to look for the Chitauri aircraft. In another room, Daredevil and Thor were looking at Loki, who was tied up. Loki probably knew about everything outside, so he immediately showed a sincere look and said, "Maybe you can go and help." "Don't worry, Thor, I will never move." "Human mushrooms are very scary, Loki. You used this trick on me when you were 3 years old. Now you'd better be honest, otherwise, I don't mind teaching you a lesson." Thor curled his lips in disdain and said unhappily. Daredevil didn't say anything. He just sat there quietly, constantly practicing and studying the observation hockey. Suddenly, Daredevil moved his arm, and the long stick on his knees was like a spirit snake coming out of a hole, attacking the air behind him. Bang! With a muffled sound, the tied Loki turned into a shadow, and the real Loki had already left the place for a distance. "Bastard! I think you don't want to be good." Seeing this, Thor immediately cursed, picked up Thor's hammer, and prepared to enforce family discipline. At this time, Loki was like a deflated ball, sitting directly on the ground. "This is really weird. That kid in spider costume can see through the illusion magic. How can even a blind man sense it? Are you Earthlings all monsters?" Daredevil ignored Loki, and he entered the state of cultivation again. but the long stick never left his hands. Maypark and others came to the eastern edge of the city. Here is connected to a sea, and just above the sea level, a small black dot was flying towards the city with flames. If it's not that big mushroom, what else could it be? How is it? Are you sure? If not, we still have time to think of other ways now. Maypark looked at Gian beside him and said seriously. Chapter 175. At this time in the hero apartment, Johnny and old Carter were no longer affected by hell and directly restored their human bodies. Harry and Norman were helping to take care of the two. Since they had no experience in taking care of people, they were in a hurry and were overwhelmed. Harry's eyes even revealed a trace of desire. Unlike his father, Harry was in the most passionate period at this time. He would rather lie on the bed than be a logistics support here. However, Norman and his son and Johnny, who were in a coma, did not know that a big mushroom had quietly attacked them. If they knew, they didn't know what kind of mood they would be in. In hell. Kinlaw nodded after getting the answer, stood up, raised his ghost hand, and the power of ghost energy surged. Strange fluctuations spread out. In an instant, all the ghosts and gods who had just dispersed all sensed this ghost energy fluctuation. These ghosts and gods were unhappy. Just now, because of the hesitation of standing in line, a lot of time was wasted. The number of souls hunted did not meet their expectations at all. If they go back now, they are really unwilling. But the Dark Lord's name is there, and for ghosts and gods, the Dark Lord's orders cannot be resisted at all. No matter how unwilling they are, they have to rush towards Kinlaw's direction. The first one to arrive was Carlo. Compared with other ghosts and gods, Carlo's experience in dealing with Kinlaw can be regarded as rich. He knew Kinlaw's character very well, so after feeling the call, he immediately rushed over. The rest of the ghosts and gods also came one after another. Soon, the 7 ghosts and gods except Brashu stood in front of Kinlaw. Seeing these ghosts and gods coming, Guyi's expression became a little unnatural, and her muscles tensed up involuntarily. Just now, one ghost and god almost took her life. Now there are 7 directly coming. It would be strange if she is not nervous. Guyi really can't understand where Kinlaw got these terrifying existences from. How did you all watch the good show just now? Kinlaw looked at the 7 ghosts and gods, with a playful expression on his face. The ghosts and gods all looked unhappy when they heard this. They knew very well that Kinlaw asked this question to settle accounts later. Just now, Brashu was about to betray and kill his master, and except for Kazan, they didn't have a single helper. Originally, Kinlaw didn't know, but now it seems that everyone knows everything clearly. The atmosphere became solemn in an instant. The depressing atmosphere can even make people forget to breathe. Okay, I know what kind of virtue you are. Not joining in the attack is already a phase for me, so forget it this time. Kinlaw waved his hand with a gentle smile on his face. Hearing this, the ghosts and gods all breathed a sigh of relief. After all, it is still in the hands of others. Apart from other things, just seeing it but not being able to eat it is enough for them to drink a pot. They have an irresistible desire for soul power. Carlo couldn't help but feel a little surprised at this time. He has seen what kind of virtue Kinlaw is. He can even squeeze a ball of powder out of a toad. So why is he so generous now? Something is wrong. There is something wrong. But Kinlaw spoke again, and deliberately prolonged the tone. The ghosts and gods raised their breath again after hearing the words. But what? Just say it. Stop talking nonsense. Kazan looked at Kinlaw coldly at this time, and said impatiently. Kinlaw shrugged his shoulders and said directly without any nonsense, I want all your gains this time. Just consider it as the price of watching the show. As soon as these words came out, the ghosts and gods suddenly became a little agitated, and their eyes were full of anger but dare not speak. But Carlo was relieved at this time. Sure enough, this was the Kinlaw he knew. Humphrey, what's wrong with giving you some soul power? Kazan snorted coldly, and swung the illusory sword in his hand, and the soul power emanated and flew directly towards Kinlaw. Kinlaw accurately grabbed the soul in his hand. After feeling it slightly, he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. These soul powers are at best the condensation of 18,000 demons. With Kazan's strength, It is absolutely impossible for him to have only obtained this little power during this period of time. Kinluo couldn't help but think of the confrontation between Kazan and Brashu when he woke up, and Kazan's mistake in the bloody world. In an instant, he seemed to understand something. The look in his eyes towards Kazan also softened. There is finally a reliable one among the ghosts and gods. Humphrey. Kazan seemed to be disgusted by Kinluo's eyes. He snorted coldly and turned directly into a ball of red light and merged into Kinluo's ghost hand. The other ghosts and gods didn't understand, but they saw that Kazan passed the test smoothly after handing over that little soul power. All of a sudden, their minds became active. Carlo didn't use Kinluo's nonsense, and he consciously summoned a ball of dark flame wrapped in soul power and passed it to Kinluo. Carlo, don't play these little tricks. Give 70% and keep 30%. TSK forget it this time. If others make trouble, don't blame me for being rude. Kinluo showed a sneer on his face, and then stretched out his hand, and the 30% of the soul power left in Carlo's body flew out involuntarily. Carlo was like an eggplant hit by frost, completely wilted, and turned into a black shadow like Kazan and merged into Kinluo's body. Seeing this, the other ghosts and gods no longer had other little tricks, and they all handed over the energy in their bodies, feeling the endless soul power. The smile on Kinluo's face became brighter and brighter. Good guys, the ghosts and gods really have something. These soul powers are more than twice what Johnny and Old Carter have obtained combined. I'm afraid that hell has been emptied by these guys. It must be said that Kinluo's thoughts are right. The original hell can be said to be full of demons, but now, there are only 2 or 3 big cats and kittens left, and they are extremely weak demons, the kind that ghosts and gods don't bother to devour. If Ksitagara Bodhisattva was in this world, he might have become a Buddha directly. Of course, the hell in this world is not worthy of Ksitagara Bodhisattva to make such a great wish. Chapter 310 The Breath of Death set out to solve it. After Brad handed over all his soul power, a trace of haze flashed in his eyes, but it soon subsided, and a bit of shame appeared on his face. He said, Mr. Kinluo, I just arrived, so some things may not be done well, please forgive me. Kinluo couldn't help but frown when he heard it. Why is this guy still so disgusting? Do you think everyone is a fool by doing these little tricks? Haha, don't come with this, Brad. Put away your hypocritical face. We are all foxes on the mountain. Don't play Liao Zai with me here. Kinluo sneered, and before Brad could react to the relationship between the fox and Liao Zai, he directly forced it into the ghost's hand. Guyi saw this scene. He couldn't help but secretly marvel in his heart. Kinluo's method is really good. He can actually play with those terrible existences in his hands. If it were her, she would never provoke so many ghosts and gods. These guys are too scary. In fact, what Guyi didn't know was that if Kinluo didn't have a system, he wouldn't be so arrogant to deal with ghosts and gods. He would hide as far away as possible when he heard their names. After absorbing the soul power, Kinluo didn't rush to digest it completely. Instead, he stored it. After all, now the Azuris system, the Great Dark Heaven, is only a step away from breaking through to the Heavenly Emperor. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.